The first thing the camera sees is not a monster. It is dust. A pale drift of it, floating sideways through a cone of artificial light, each grain moving slowly enough to seem undecided, each speck bright for a second, and then gone. The camera is 4,000 meters below the ocean surface. Above it, the ship is somewhere in weather. Above that, clouds are crossing a sky no one down here can see. The sun is already moving toward afternoon, though afternoon has no meaning on the floor. The machine has been falling for hours. It left the deck in daylight, disappeared beneath the hull, passed through water that still remembered blue, crossed the last weak remains of sunlight, and entered a dark so complete that the lamps had to invent the world a few meters at a time. Now it hangs just above the bottom. Not in a canyon, not beside a smoking vent, not at the edge of a trench, but over something far more common and far more difficult to imagine. A plane. A plane under the sea. At first, it looks like nothing at all. A soft floor, a few shallow wrinkles, a scattered pebble that might be a stone, might be a mineral nodule, might be the beginning of a life story too slow for a human mind to notice. The beam cannot reach far. Beyond its circle, the darkness resumes without effort. There is no skyline, no tree line, no hill crest, no horizon that the eye can trust. Just a nearly level world continuing outward, and that is the strange part. The emptiest looking place in the image may be the most ordinary landscape on Earth. Not ordinary because it is familiar, ordinary because there is so much of it. Abyssal plains spread across the deep ocean basins in distances so large that maps have to make them small just to fit them on a page. They lie beneath the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Southern Ocean, folded between continental margins and mid-ocean ridges, interrupted by seamounts. Fracture zones, ridges, trenches, and scars. They are not one plane. They are many. But together they form a hidden geography so vast that the phrase seafloor becomes almost misleading. It sounds like a bottom, a boundary, an ending. But the abyssal plain is not an ending. It is a country under the world. On land, we give names to wide open places. We name deserts. We name grasslands. We name steppes and pampas and tundra. We imagine them with wind moving across them, with animals crossing them, with weather laying shadows over them. But the largest plains on Earth do not have weather in the ordinary sense. No rain falls there, though something always falls. No wind passes over them, though currents move with a patience that can outlive dynasties. No sunlight warms them, though they belong to the same planet as every sunrise. The largest open spaces on Earth are dark, and most human beings will never stand above them with any sense of what is below. A passenger jet crosses the Pacific, and the abyssal plain lies under the clouds, under the ocean's skin, under the shipping lanes and tuna and drifting plastics and whales diving into cold blue. A cargo vessel travels at night, and below its engines, below its propeller noise, the plane continues. A child in a coastal town looks at a globe and sees a field of blue where the ocean is, but that blue is not the place itself. It is only the surface color of concealment. The plane is not blue. The plane is black and gray and slow. Its light comes from machines, from animals, from the brief work of chemistry, from nothing at all. Its sediment is made of things that once belonged elsewhere, shell fragments from microscopic organisms, clay carried by wind, volcanic dust, the remains of plankton, the smallest endings of countless surface lives. A whale that dies above the plane may fall for hours and become, for a season or for decades, a settlement. A storm that no abyssal creature ever sees may change what rains down weeks later. A bloom of algae in bright water may become, after many transformations, a meal for an animal moving blind through mud 4 kilometers below. There is no separation really between the shining sea and the dark floor. Only distance, only time, only the long vertical sorting of what lives, what sinks, what is eaten, and what finally comes to rest. The camera lowers a little more. Its legs touch the bottom. The sediment rises. For a moment, the plane disappears inside its own softness. A small cloud opens around the frame, so delicate that it looks like breath in cold air. Then the particles drift away and the floor returns. The instrument sits in a place that may never have been illuminated before. Not by the sun, not by fire, not by lightning, not by a human lamp until now. Something moves near the edge of the beam. A sea cucumber, pale and slow, pushes itself through the sediment with the seriousness of a creature doing work older than cities. It does not hurry. It has no reason to hurry. The plane does not reward panic. Food is scattered. Encounters are rare. Energy is expensive. On the surface, speed often means survival. Down here, survival may look like restraint. The sea cucumber crosses a small line in the mud and keeps going. Then it is gone. Not vanished. Exactly. Only outside the beam. And the plane is still there. This is where the human mind struggles. It expects a great landscape to announce itself. It expects mountains to rise, forests to thicken, rivers to curve, colors to change, animals to gather in numbers that can be seen from a distance. The abyssal plane refuses that kind of drama. It does not lift itself into spectacle. It does not give the camera easy evidence of abundance. It asks for a different attention. A track matters. A burrow matters. A small mound in sediment matters. A nodule matters. A sponge anchored to a rare hard surface matters. A place that looks blank may be full of relationships too thin, too small, too dispersed, or too slow for a passing eye. That is the first lesson of the abyssal plane. It does not look like half a planet. It looks like a little light on mud. And because it looks like a little light on mud, it has been easy, for a long time, to underestimate it. Imagine lowering a coin from the deck of a ship. It turns once in the air, touches the sea, flashes, and begins to sink. For a while, sunlight follows it. The coin flickers as it falls. Then, color leaves it. Then shape becomes more important than shine. Then the water becomes too dark for any ordinary eye. The coin continues through kilometers of cold. It may tumble past animals that make their own light, past transparent bodies, past drifting particles and falling scraps of life. Hours later, if nothing eats or catches it, if no current carries it elsewhere, it may settle on the abyssal plane. A small human object on a floor larger than continents. The coin would not know where it is. Neither, for most of history, would we. The sea surface was once a road before it was a window. Ships crossed it to trade, conquer, flee, fish, migrate, and return. Sailors learned wind and current, not bathymetry. They knew reefs because reefs could break hulls. They knew shoals because shoals could destroy them. The deep bottom, out beyond the reach of anchors and soundings, was mostly an abstraction, a place beneath danger, but not part of daily navigation. Somewhere down there, the sea had a floor. That was enough. For centuries, enough was wrong, because the floor was not a floor in the simple sense. It was a hidden geography, and within that geography, the abyssal plains were the great silent expanses, the dark interiors of the ocean basins, the places that made the planet's surface stranger than any map of land could suggest. A map of Earth is usually a map of what rises into air. Continents are drawn carefully, mountains are shaded, borders are argued over, rivers are named. Cities glow in photographs taken from orbit. The ocean, on many maps, becomes a blue interruption, a distance between the places where human history is supposed to happen. But if the water were lifted away, if the ocean could drain without destroying the world, the planet would not look like the globe in a classroom. It would reveal a second landscape. Ridges would run like seams through basins. Volcanic cones would stand in darkness. Trenches would open like narrow wounds. Continental slopes would descend into aprons of sediment. And between these features, enormous plains would appear, smoother than almost anything on land, not because the earth was born smooth there, but because time had been laying dust over roughness for millions of years. The abyssal plain is a buried landscape. Beneath its quiet surface is crust made at mid-ocean ridges, basalt that cooled from molten rock, fractured and rough, moving slowly away from the ridge as seafloor spreads. The young crust is not gentle at first. It has ridges, cracks, volcanic forms, relief. But as it travels outward, as it cools and sinks and ages, it begins to receive sediment. Fine particles descend from above. Turbid flows may rush down from continental margins and spread across the floor. Clay accumulates. Shells dissolve or settle depending on depth and chemistry. A rough volcanic surface becomes softened, then hidden, then leveled into a plain so smooth that its flatness is not a lack of history, but the result of too much history to see at once. The plain is not simple. It is smoothed complexity. A landscape covered by the patience of falling things. The camera's beam reveals only the topmost skin. The few centimeters visible are the present tense. Beneath them are older layers, then older ones again, each containing records of ocean chemistry, climate, volcanic eruptions, biological productivity, dust storms, asteroid debris, changes in circulation, the long changing breath of the planet. A core of abyssal sediment can become a vertical calendar. Not a calendar of human appointments, but of glacial cycles, extinctions, warm intervals, cold intervals, ash falls, organisms blooming and declining in seas no human watched. In this way, the plain is not only space, it is archive. An archive without shelves, without labels, without librarians, written in mud so slowly that a fingernail can cover thousands of years. And on its surface, animals live. This matters. For a long time, people imagined the deep sea as a desert, and in some ways the comparison is useful. Food is sparse, distances are wide, life may be scattered. But deserts are not nothing. Deserts have tracks, seeds, burrows, waiting, bloom, violence, water hidden in unlikely places. The abyssal plain is like that. If a desert were drowned, frozen, dark, pressurized, and fed by the remains of a sunlit world overhead. The plain is not dead. It is underfed. It is not empty. It is quiet. And quiet can fool a hurried observer. The camera waits. The lamp hums silently in its housing. The sea cucumber has passed. A brittle star lifts its arms into the current, taking food from water that looks empty. A small crustacean appears at the bait bag, moving with sudden nervous precision. Worms work beneath the sediment, unseen except for the signs they leave. Microbes occupy surfaces no camera can photograph without magnification. A sponge rises from a hard place that may be rare for kilometers. A fish approaches from the dark and stops just outside the brightest light, its body almost less visible than its hesitation. The plain is full of hesitation. Not because animals are doubtful in a human way, but because life here has learned the cost of exposure. A meal may be a gift, a movement may be a risk, a scent may be a road, a carcass may change everything. Then, nothing obvious happens for several minutes. And that nothing is part of the truth. On land, a documentary can cut away from the quiet parts. It can show the hunt, the storm, the migration, the eruption, the hatchling, the chase. The abyssal plain does not always provide scenes at the speed of entertainment. It holds processes. It holds long intervals between visible events. It holds a kind of ecological time that asks the human imagination to slow until boredom becomes information. In the abyss, boredom may be the surface form of wonder. A scientist watching hours of footage knows this. At first, the images seem repetitive. Sediment, snow, a small animal, sediment again, a rock, a track, more sediment. But then the eye begins to adapt. It notices how one area differs from another. It sees where nodules cluster. It sees mounds, pits, trails, faint depressions. It sees that the animals are not random decorations, but part of a system. It sees that the surface is not blank. It is written lightly. The abyss does not shout. It annotates. And we are only beginning to read. The phrase "half the planet" sounds impossible at first. Half the planet feels like a claim made by mountains, deserts, ice sheets, forests, cities, fields, coastlines, the places where human life can place its feet. Half the planet should be visible in satellite images, photographed by astronauts, argued over by governments, crossed by roads, divided into regions, named in school books. Half the planet should have weather reports. It should have ruins. It should have stories told by people who live there. But the abyssal plains do not have citizens. They have residents. That difference matters. A citizen writes laws, inherits flags, builds borders, speaks for a place in public. A resident only lives. The animals of the abyssal plain live inside a geography that cannot vote, cannot advertise itself, cannot become a homeland in the human political imagination. And yet, by area, it is one of the dominant landscapes of Earth. NOAA describes abyssal plains as covering most of the ocean floor, and when the ocean itself covers about 70% of the planet, the arithmetic becomes startling. A landscape hidden underwater approaches the scale of everything we call land. There are more abyssal plains beneath the world than there are visible continents above the sea. Not more in the way a slogan says more in the cold patience of surface area. If you could walk across them, the journey would break language. Imagine beginning somewhere in the deep Atlantic, where the continental rise has finally eased and the seafloor becomes broad and low. There is no air. So imagine walking only as a thought. A ghost body that does not need lungs, does not collapse under pressure, does not freeze. Imagine moving across sediment under a ceiling of water 4 kilometers thick. Each step would raise powder from an archive older than nations. Behind you, the mark of your passing might remain for decades, perhaps longer, because nothing down here comes to erase it quickly. You walk. The light you carry shows only the ground nearby. Beyond it, the plain continues without a view. Distance loses its usual rewards. On land, walking gives you changing horizons. A tree approaches, a ridge rises, a town appears, a cloud shadow crosses a field. Down here, the world does not open the same way. It withholds the horizon. You learn progress from instruments, not from scenery. You learn that 1,000 meters crossed in darkness can feel like almost no motion at all. After one day, the plain remains. After a week, the plain remains. After a month, if thought could keep walking, the plain remains. This is not emptiness. It is scale without spectacle. Human beings are not good at scale unless scale performs. We understand mountains because they interrupt the sky. We understand storms because they move toward us. We understand forests because they surround the body. We understand cities because they exceed our personal control. But the abyssal plain exceeds us in a quieter way. It does not loom. It lies beneath. It is immense without altitude, without noise, without flame, without any need to appear impressive. The plain's greatness is horizontal and hidden. That makes it easy to ignore. It is one thing to say a forest is being cut when people can see the trees fall. It is one thing to say a glacier is retreating when cameras can compare then and now. It is one thing to say smoke fills a valley when the human lung protests. But what language carries a disturbance across an abyssal plain? What image makes a sediment plume in black water emotionally legible? What story can make a nodule habitat feel as real as a rainforest when the nodule looks, at first glance, like a stone in the mud? The abyss asks for imagination before emotion. That is one reason it is vulnerable. Not because it is weak. The pressure alone is enough to remind us that the deep is not fragile in the simple way a flower is fragile. The abyss does not break because a human touches it. The ocean has survived asteroid impacts, climate swings, tectonic rearrangements, extinctions, long ages when no creature with a human-like eye existed to see it. But ecosystems can be resilient at one scale and vulnerable at another. Sediment can remain disturbed. Slow-growing animals can be removed. Communities tied to hard surfaces can lose the one structure they needed. A place can be physically vast and ecologically delicate. A continent of mud can still have a wound. This is difficult for us because we confuse large with inexhaustible. We have made that mistake before. We looked at forests and believed there would always be more trees. We looked at fish and believed the sea would always provide more bodies. We looked at the atmosphere and believed smoke could vanish into something too large to be changed. We looked at rivers and believed they could carry away whatever we no longer wanted to see. Again and again, the earth has corrected that belief. Not through punishment in the moral sense, but through consequence. Species disappeared. Fisheries collapsed. Air warmed. Waters changed. Waste returned. The abyssal plain enters human history at a dangerous moment. We are discovering it more clearly, just as we are becoming capable of altering it. This timing is not accidental. Exploration and exploitation often share tools. Better maps allow better science, but also better targeting. More capable robots allow careful observation, but also industrial access. A mineral nodule can be studied as habitat or counted as ore. A seamount can be mapped as biodiversity or assessed for extraction. The same darkness that once protected these places by making them inaccessible is beginning to thin before machines. But the darkness has not thinned for public understanding. That imbalance matters. Industry can arrive before collective imagination. A contract can be negotiated before a child knows that the abyssal plain exists. A machine can be designed before the public has learned the difference between empty-looking and empty. A legal boundary can be drawn across a region that has never been visually surveyed in any meaningful way. The abyssal plain is not waiting for discovery the way a locked room waits for a key. It has been operating. It has been receiving. It has been feeding. It has been burying carbon, hosting life, recording climate, supporting food webs, and tying the surface to the deep with 1,000 quiet exchanges. Human discovery is not the beginning of its story. It is only the moment the surface mind begins to notice. That can be humbling if we let it. The plain did not become real when sonar traced it. It did not become alive when NOAA filmed it. It did not become valuable when minerals were measured in its nodules. It did not become endangered when a treaty meeting put it on an agenda. All of that happened in our world. The abyssal plain had its own reality long before our instruments reached it, and it will continue to have one whether or not our attention remains. A camera can prove presence, but it does not create it. There is a small cruelty in how little the surface gives back to the abyss. The surface sends food, yes. It sends organic matter, bodies, particles, the raining leftovers that sustain much of deep life. It sends oxygen carried by cold currents from polar regions, slow-moving breath for organisms far below. It sends storms as pulses of matter. It sends seasonal changes translated into sinking debris. In that sense, the surface feeds the plain. But the surface also sends what it cannot absorb. Plastic threads, chemical residues, mercury, persistent pollutants, soot, noise, broken fishing gear. The long afterlife of industry. The plane receives without choosing. A creature in the abyss does not know the factory, the city, the river mouth, the landfill, the storm drain. It encounters the final object, the altered particle, the contaminant already liberated from intention. A bottle cap on abyssal sediment is not just litter, it is evidence that distance has failed. The deepest dark is not beyond us, only beyond our bodies. That realization changes the emotional geography of the planet. It means there is no true away in a world of connected systems. The abyssal plane is far from the beach in depth, but not separate from the beach in consequence. A flake of organic matter can link a plankton bloom to a worm burrow. A current can link polar water to tropical basins. A discarded object can link a human hand to a place no human hand could survive. The world is continuous in ways our attention is not. To understand the abyssal plane, you have to think vertically. This is harder than it sounds. Most human movement is horizontal. We go across streets, across rooms, across borders, across fields. Even when we fly, we mostly imagine travel as crossing a map. Height is a temporary condition. Depth is even less familiar. We do not live in layers. We live on surfaces. The ocean lives in layers. Sunlit water, twilight water, midnight water, abyssal water, hadal trenches. Warm water above cold. Oxygen-rich currents sliding into basins. Nutrients rising in one place, sinking in another. Animals migrating upward at night and downward before dawn. Particles moving down through all of it, transformed by mouth after mouth, microbe after microbe, until a small fraction reaches the bottom. The abyssal plane is the end of many vertical stories. But end does not mean final. On the plane, organic matter is eaten, buried, stirred, recycled. Sediments become habitat. Microbes continue the work of transformation. Carbon may be locked away or returned through slow processes. Even burial is activity when the timescale is long enough. The abyss is not a trash bin for the surface. It is metabolism at planetary scale. The phrase marine snow is almost too gentle. It makes the fall sound clean, picturesque, delicate. In the beam of a submersible, it can indeed look beautiful. Pale flakes descending in black water, an endless soft weather without clouds. But every flake is the remnant of life, or the packaging of waste from life. Some of it is mucus, some fecal matter, some dead plankton, some fragments of organisms that bloomed in sunlight and then broke apart. Some is mineral dust. Some is the chemistry of the surface turned into sinking matter. The abyssal plane is fed by this slow rain. A flake may be intercepted by a zooplankton. It may be shredded by a small animal. It may be colonized by microbes. It may dissolve before reaching the bottom. It may join other particles and become larger, sink faster, fall through the dark like a torn page from a book of sunlight. By the time it arrives on the plane, it may bear little resemblance to the life that created it. But energy remains. Not much. Enough to matter. Food at the bottom of the ocean is often memory reduced to calories. A dead organism in the surface ocean may become a particle. A particle may become a meal. A meal may become movement. Movement may leave a track. A track may remain in sediment long after the animal has passed. The plane keeps signs of hunger. Hunger is the invisible weather of the abyss. It moves animals not like wind moves grass, but like gravity moves water through hidden channels. It shapes bodies. It shapes patience. It shapes the economy of motion. Creatures of the abyssal plane are not dramatic because they wish to impress us. Their forms are negotiations with scarcity. A large mouth may be a kind of insurance. A slow metabolism may be a philosophy written in tissue. A translucent body may be a compromise with energy. A long antenna may be a search strategy in a world where meals are rare and darkness makes eyes insufficient. When a whale falls, everything changes. A whale carcass on an abyssal plain is not simply a body, it is a sudden island. It is a banquet arriving from a sky of water. Scavengers appear. Sharks may come. Hagfish, amphipods, crabs, then worms. Then bacteria. Then organisms that use the chemical breakdown of bone and fat. A single fall can support communities through stages, each one feeding on what the previous stage has opened. In the plain's usual scarcity, a whale becomes an event so rich it rewrites the local ecology. But most days are not whale days. Most days are small rain. Most days are waiting. And waiting is not absence, it is adaptation. The abyssal plain teaches a difficult kind of patience. Not patience as a virtue posted on a wall, patience as biology, patience as sedimentation, patience as the only way a world fed by falling dust can remain alive over an area larger than imagination. If surface life is often a fire, the abyss is an ember under ash. It does not flare often. It holds. It conserves. It persists. The camera remains on the bottom. Its timestamp advances. The same patch of mud changes slowly. A small animal crosses the left side of the frame. Another emerges from below. Something disturbs the bait. A fleck of snow lands, then disappears into texture. The lights reveal the plain, but they also make it strange. Without the lights, most of this would continue unobserved. With the lights, animals may behave differently. The instrument is both witness and intrusion. This is the second lesson of the abyssal plain. There is no neutral way for humans to enter it. Every descent adds a presence. Every lamp changes the darkness for a moment. Every landing makes a mark. Every sample removes something. Even careful science has a footprint. The question is not whether we can look without touching at all. The question is whether we can touch lightly enough, thoughtfully enough, rarely enough, and for reasons worthy of the disturbance. The abyss requires a gentler curiosity than the surface world usually practices. That gentleness may not come naturally. The language of exploration has often been muscular. Conquer, penetrate, claim, master, open the frontier, push the boundary, win the race, plant the flag, reach the bottom, go farther than anyone has gone before. It is language shaped by ambition, and ambition has built remarkable things. It has lowered vehicles into trenches and sent cameras into impossible cold. It has measured depths, mapped ridges, recovered samples, found animals no one expected. Without ambition, much would remain unknown. But the abyssal plain complicates ambition, because the scale is too large to conquer and too old to flatter us. No single descent masters it. No map completes it emotionally. No sample summarizes it. A machine can cross a tiny part of one plane, and the plane remains almost entirely beyond experience. Even high-resolution mapping does not equal knowledge. A mapped seafloor can still be ecologically unread. Bathymetry gives shape. It does not give relationship. It does not show which animals depend on which surfaces, which currents deliver food, which disturbances recover, and which do not. Knowing the outline of a place is not the same as knowing how it lives. The abyssal plain is a test of whether our species can mature from discovery into attention. Discovery is the bright moment. Attention is the long work after the brightness fades. Discovery says, there is something here. Attention asks, what is it connected to? How does it change? What harms it? What does it need? What do we still not understand? What should we leave alone? The plain needs attention more than astonishment. Astonishment opens the door. Attention keeps us from walking through it with heavy boots. Long before a camera settles on abyssal mud, the plain begins somewhere else. It begins at a ridge. Not a ridge in the mountain sense, though some of these underwater ranges are grander than anything that rises into air. It begins where the planet opens itself along seams, where molten rock comes up, cools, hardens, and becomes new oceanic crust. There, at mid-ocean ridges, the seafloor is born in heat and fracture. It is young, black, sharp in places, broken by faults, shaped by lava, marked by chemical exchange between rock and seawater. It is not yet a plain. It is a beginning still rough with birth. Then, it moves. Not quickly. Not in a way the eye can enjoy. The crust travels outward at rates comparable to the growth of fingernails, but it travels without stopping, year after year, century after century, through the slow machinery of plate tectonics. It cools, it thickens, it sinks. The ridge remains behind, making more floor. The older crust carries its roughness into deeper water. And above it, the ocean begins to cover the roughness with time. The abyssal plain is made by the meeting of geology and patience. If the seafloor were exposed to air, erosion would carve it with rain, frost, rivers, wind, landslides, roots. Mountains would crumble visibly. Valleys would form. Dust would move. But at the bottom of the sea, the processes are different. The rough basaltic crust is buried under sediment arriving from above and from the sides. Fine clays drift through water. Tiny shells, called tests when they belong to certain microorganisms, sink after their makers die. Dust from continents can cross oceans in the air, enter the sea, and finally settle in a darkness no desert will ever see. Volcanic ash spreads through water. Turbidity currents, dense underwater avalanches of sediment, can pour down slopes and fan outward across the basin. Layer after layer. A little in 1 year. A little more in 10,000. A little more after an ice age rearranges currents and sea levels. A little more after a volcanic eruption leaves a signature in the mud. A little more after blooms of plankton live and die at the surface. The plain becomes smooth, not because nothing happened, but because too many small things happened for too long. Smoothness can be deceptive. On a satellite map, a desert dune field may appear simple until you stand inside it and feel how complex a simple line of sand can be. The abyssal plain is similar. The broad form is flat, but the surface is not featureless. It has microtopography, little ridges, mounds, depressions, burrows, tracks, nodule clusters, ripples from currents, small scars from falling rocks or biological activity. It has invisible differences in grain size, chemistry, organic content, oxygen penetration, microbial community, and the history of what fell there. It has provinces, it has patchiness, it has a geography at scales too small for ordinary maps and too subtle for our first impressions. A plain is never just flatness. Flatness is what the distant eye sees when detail becomes too fine. This matters because many human decisions are made at the wrong scale. From a global view, the abyss may look abundant enough to absorb disturbance. From a legal chart, a mining zone may look like a polygon. From a business model, a nodule field may become tonnage. From a television image, the seafloor may look like gray sameness. But an organism living there does not experience a polygon. It experiences surfaces, currents, chemistry, shelter, food, risk, and the exact place where its life can continue. A nodule may be the nearest rock. That sounds minor until you imagine a world of mud. In many abyssal regions, hard surfaces are rare. Polymetallic nodules form slowly as metals precipitate around a nucleus, growing in layers over millions of years. They can look like potatoes, blackened stones, lumps set into pale sediment. To industry, they are repositories of manganese, nickel, cobalt, copper, and other elements. To a creature, they may be ground. A place to attach. A platform above suffocating sediment, a piece of structure in a nearly structureless plain. A sponge may use it. A coral may use it. Microbes may occupy its surfaces. Small animals may move around it, under it, between it and the sediment. Remove the nodule, And the metal is not the only thing removed. A tiny island is removed. A habitat that took geological time to grow is treated as harvestable in a human year. The abyssal plain becomes morally complicated because value speaks several languages at once. A battery speaks one language. A sponge speaks another. A climate policy speaks another. A mining machine speaks another. A sediment community speaks in no language we easily hear. It is tempting to simplify this into heroes and villains, but the abyss resists that too. The need for metals in a world trying to move away from fossil fuels is real. The damage caused by mining on land is real. The desire to reduce conflict and pollution from terrestrial extraction is understandable. But the existence of a need does not make the abyss empty. It does not turn a living plain into a warehouse. It does not erase the fact that the animals there have no easy replacement for the structures we might remove. There is no clean moral arithmetic when the variables include systems we barely understand. That is why the first duty may be slowness. Not paralysis. Slowness. A refusal to let desire become inevitability before knowledge has caught up. The plain has already taught slowness by existing. A nodule grows slowly. Sediment gathers slowly. Large-scale recovery, if it happens, may happen slowly. Communities may assemble slowly. The water itself moves through global circulation on timescales that can make a human lifetime feel like a brief surface disturbance. And yet human extraction, once permitted and financed, wants speed. It wants schedules, production targets, quarterly results, supply certainty, scale. It wants the abyss to become accessible in the tempo of markets. That mismatch may be one of the most dangerous features of deep-sea mining. The ecosystem operates in geological and ecological time. The machinery operates in industrial time. When these times collide, the faster one often leaves marks the slower one cannot quickly heal. The abyssal plain is not defenseless. It is slow. And slow is vulnerable to fast. A machine moving across the plain would not need malice to be destructive. It would only need weight, suction, cutting, disturbance, sediment plumes, noise, lights, roots, repeated passes, and the assumption that what cannot be seen clearly cannot matter much. It might lift nodules from the mud, separate them from sediment, send them upward through pipes, leave tracks in a place where natural disturbance is rare. It might create clouds of fine particles that drift and settle on animals adapted to clear low-energy conditions. It might change the chemistry near the bottom. It might erase small structures that took millions of years to form. The machine would do what it was built to do. That is why responsibility belongs before design, not after. The abyss is too large to treat care as a patch added later. Yet there is another danger in speaking only of threat. The plain becomes a victim in our imagination, and victimhood can flatten complexity. The abyssal plain is not just a place that may be damaged. It is a place that lives, stores, feeds, records, transforms, and surprises. It deserves protection, not because it is helpless, but because it is meaningful. The better story begins not with what we might take from it, but with what it already is. A nearly level world under kilometers of water. A landscape made from the slow burial of roughness. An archive of climate and life. A habitat for animals that survive on scarcity. A field of mineral forms that can be both geological record and biological surface. A central part of the largest livable volume on Earth. A surface so hidden that most people have never imagined it in detail, though it may cover more of the planet than all the familiar places combined. To love such a place requires abstraction at first. Then, the abstraction must become bodily. You have to feel, as much as a mind can feel, the cold, the pressure, the distance above, the weight of water where sky would be, the absence of wave sound at the bottom, the way a lamp creates a small temporary room in a darkness with no walls, the way mud can be older than memory, the way a creature the length of a hand can be native to a world larger than continents. Only then does the plane stop being a fact and begin to become a place. Place is an important word. A fact can be known and forgotten. A place can be cared for. The abyssal plain has suffered from being known as a fact before being felt as a place. It appears in textbooks as a feature. It appears in diagrams as a broad flat zone. It appears in mining discussions as resource potential. It appears in bathymetric maps as blue shading. But all of these are ways of seeing from outside. A place also needs inside imagination, not fantasy. Not pretending we can inhabit it as its animals do, but a disciplined attempt to understand that it has its own conditions, histories, and forms of belonging. A place does not need human footsteps to be a place. That may be the hardest lesson for a terrestrial species. On land, place often begins with entry. A valley becomes real when you walk into it. A room becomes yours when you sit in it. A road becomes memory when you travel it often enough to recognize its turns. The abyssal plain denies ordinary entry. We cannot walk there. We cannot breathe there. We cannot feel the sediment under bare feet. We can only arrive through hulls, cameras, cables, sensors, samples, models, and imagination. But mediated contact is still contact. A video frame can become a doorway if we learn to look long enough. A core sample can become a time machine if we learn to read it carefully. A sonar map can become the first outline of a hidden country if we remember that outline is not ownership. Early oceanographers had to discover even the shape of the deep. Before precise instruments, measuring ocean depth was slow and crude. A weighted line could be dropped from a ship, paying out through the water until it touched bottom. That method worked, but it was laborious, uncertain, and sparse. The deep ocean remained mostly guessed between soundings. Then, echo sounding changed the picture. Sound could travel down, strike the seafloor, and return. Time could become depth. War, navigation, science, and industry all pushed mapping forward. Later, multi-beam sonar widened the swath. Satellites inferred large features through subtle changes in sea surface height. Autonomous vehicles, research vessels, and global projects added more data. With each improvement, the plane became less abstract, but never fully known. As of the mid-2020s, global efforts have mapped a growing portion of the ocean floor to modern standards, yet much remains unmapped at high resolution. A complete rough outline exists, but the difference between a rough outline and a detailed survey is the difference between knowing a city exists and knowing the alley where someone lives. The abyssal plain is not blank on every map anymore, but much of it remains visually unseen, biologically undersampled, and ecologically unknown. We have drawn the coastline of a dark continent without walking its roads. And perhaps roads is the wrong word. There are no roads. There are tracks, made by animals, by currents, by falling debris, by occasional landslides, by machines. Some tracks are natural, some are human. In places where mining tests or trawling have disturbed deep sediment, marks can persist in ways that feel almost eerie. The surface world is used to erasure. Rain softens footprints. Plants grow back. Wind reshapes sand. Animals trample paths. Snow melts. At abyssal depths, energy is lower. Sediment may not be quickly stirred or renewed. A scar can remain legible long after the moment that made it. The abyss has a long memory, not memory with consciousness. Memory as persistence. The plane remembers by not erasing quickly. This gives every action a different weight. A footprint in wet beach sand is temporary. A machine track in abyssal sediment may last beyond the people who authorized it. A lost object may sit in darkness for generations. A plume may settle over animals that grow slowly. A removed nodule may not be replaced on any human timescale. The abyss turns human action into geological evidence more readily than we are comfortable admitting. When we disturb it, we enter its archive. We become part of the mud record. That should make the hand slower. But slowness is not the same as silence. The abyssal plane needs voices from the surface because it cannot provide its own in human institutions. Scientists, indigenous communities with ocean relationships, conservationists, policymakers, engineers, artists, and citizens all become translators of a place none of them can fully inhabit. Translation is imperfect, always, but without translation, the plane becomes available to whoever speaks most confidently about it. A mineral company can translate the plane into resource. A state can translate it into jurisdiction. A scientist can translate it into data. A filmmaker can translate it into atmosphere. A regulator can translate it into risk. A better culture would allow many translations to challenge one another before decisions harden, because no single language is enough for half a planet. The camera on the bottom records another hour. The bait has drawn scavengers now. They arrive from a darkness that looked empty until smell made it legible. Amphipods gather, pale bodies flexing. A fish darts in, then out. The plane around the bait becomes briefly crowded. The event is artificial, arranged by humans to make life visible. This too is a reminder. When we say a place is empty, we often mean only that we have not asked the right question. The bait asks one question: who can smell food here? The answer appears out of the dark. But there are other questions. Who lives without bait? Who grazes the sediment surface? Who filters particles from currents? Who depends on nodules? Who is microbial and therefore invisible to the camera? Who arrives only after years? Who uses chemical traces we do not measure? Who avoids the light? Who was present before the machine landed and left because of it? Every method reveals its own world and hides others. The plane is too large for one kind of seeing. Perhaps that is why it feels so mysterious. Not because it is supernatural. Because every answer keeps a shadow. A sonar map answers shape and hides texture. A photograph answers texture and hides distance. A sample answers chemistry and kills context. A genetic sequence answers kinship and hides behavior. A time-lapse answers motion and hides everything outside the frame. A model answers patterns and hides surprise. Knowledge accumulates, but the abyss keeps reminding us that no instrument is innocent and no result is whole. This is not a reason to stop learning. It is a reason to learn humbly. Humility is not ignorance. Humility is the knowledge that what you know has edges. The abyssal plane is made of edges. The edge of light, the edge of continental influence, the edge between sediment and water, the edge between food and starvation, the edge between geology and biology, the edge between exploration and disturbance, the edge between a place treated as empty and a place recognized as alive. To stand at that edge, even from far above, is to feel the planet become larger again. There is a reason the word abyss has survived so long. It does not simply mean deep. It means depth that resists completion in the mind. A depth that feels less like a measurement than a falling away of ordinary confidence. In ancient language, abyss could mean bottomless, immeasurable, a gulf that defeated the rope. The lamp, the story. The abyssal plane is not bottomless, of course. It has a floor. It has coordinates. It can be mapped, sampled, crossed by vehicles, measured in meters. Yet the old feeling remains, because measurement does not remove strangeness. Sometimes it sharpens it. 4,000 meters is a number. 4,000 meters of water overhead is a condition. Between those two, the abyss begins. On the deck of a ship, 4,000 meters can become a number on a screen. The cable length. The depth readout. The pressure converted into units. Scientists work with numbers because numbers make the impossible manageable. But the body hears the number differently when it remembers that 4 kilometers on land might be an ordinary walk, a quick drive, a commute, a distance crossed while barely looking up. In water, the same distance becomes separation from breath, light, warmth, and rescue. Distance changes character when it goes downward. At the surface, you can look across 4 kilometers and see the other side. A town, a hill, a line of trees. At sea, you can look 4 kilometers down and see nothing. Not because nothing is there, but because the medium itself refuses the eye. The plane may be directly beneath the ship, closer than a mountain on the horizon, but it is more inaccessible than many places far away in the sky. The moon can be seen. The abyssal plane must be inferred, reached, paid for, endured by machines. It is nearby and hidden. This combination unsettles us. The unknown at the edge of the universe is frightening in one way. It is distant enough to remain abstract. The unknown beneath a calm sea is frightening in another. It is close enough to be intimate. A fishing boat can drift over the abyss while someone eats lunch from a plastic container. A storm can pass above it. A submarine cable can lie across it. A dead bird can sink toward it. A volcanic ash cloud from a continent can settle on it. It is part of daily Earth, not outside it. And yet the mind rarely includes it in the day. Imagine the planet as a house. Most human attention takes place on the roof, the outer walls, the windows lit at night. We decorate the rooms we inhabit. We argue over their ownership. We heat them, cool them, fill them with voices. The abyssal plains would be the vast cellar under everything, except cellar is too domestic and too small. They are foundations and storage and archive and habitat at once. They are not below life. They are another life arrangement, down where the house becomes geological. But the metaphor fails, because a cellar is built by people. The abyss was not built for us. That distinction needs to remain. A place can support the world without being designed around human needs. The abyssal plane helps process the planet's materials, stores sediments, hosts communities, receives carbon, participates in circulation and climate. But it does not exist as infrastructure for civilization. It is not a service provider waiting beneath the ocean. It is the Earth doing Earth's work, and our benefits are incidental. The surface world often calls those benefits ecosystem services. It is a useful phrase. It is also a narrow one. It names what systems do for us, which matters, because policy often needs that language. But a plane 4,000 meters down is not valuable only because it helps regulate carbon, or holds minerals, or supports fisheries indirectly, or stores records useful to science. It is also valuable because it is a world. Because things live there. Because histories accumulate there. Because existence itself has forms beyond usefulness. The abyssal plane should not have to pass a human usefulness test to deserve restraint. Still, the usefulness is real, and it is enormous. Deep ocean sediments participate in the global carbon cycle. Organic matter that sinks can be transformed, eaten, respired, or buried. Burial can remove carbon from rapid exchange with the atmosphere for long periods. The deep ocean stores heat. It stores carbon dioxide. Its circulation links polar seas, tropical basins, surface weather, and climate timescales. What happens in the deep does not stay in the deep, though the consequences may move slowly enough for humans to forget the connection. The abyss is slow, but it is not isolated. A molecule of oxygen that reaches the abyss may have begun its journey near the surface in cold high-latitude water. In places where surface water becomes cold, salty, and dense, it can sink, carrying oxygen into the interior ocean. That water then moves through deep currents, spreading through basins over years, decades, centuries. Animals on abyssal plains live by breath delivered through this planetary circulation, even though no wave above them seems involved. A change in climate can alter temperature. Oxygen, stratification, and the timing or quality of food reaching the seafloor. The surface writes letters to the abyss in chemistry. The abyss answers slowly, sometimes too slowly for politics. But it answers. A warming surface can change the amount of organic matter produced, the species producing it, the rate at which it sinks, and the oxygen available for animals below. Ocean acidification can affect organisms whose shells contribute to sediments. Changing circulation can alter deep water ventilation. The abyssal plain may feel timeless in an image, but it is not outside change. It is changing with the rest of the planet, only in a register that resists the speed of headlines. The plain has no storms in the dramatic sense, but the storm above can still reach it as food. After a bloom, a pulse of material may sink. After dust crosses an ocean, particles may join the rain. After a whale dies, a dark patch of seafloor becomes crowded. After a landslide on a continental slope, sediment may rush downward in a dense flow that moves like an underwater avalanche, carrying wreckage, organisms, and mud across distances. The abyss does not receive weather as wind and rain. It receives weather as delayed consequence. A hurricane does not blow across the plain. It arrives later as fragments. This delayed arrival changes how we should think about connection. Surface events do not vanish when they leave the camera's view. They enter systems. They are carried, diluted, transformed, buried, eaten, dissolved. The abyssal plain is one of the places where the surface's excess and endings are sorted through by time. There is a dignity to that work. The plain takes what falls. It does not choose. It does not complain. It does not hurry. It receives the ash of volcanoes and the shells of plankton, the dust of deserts and the bodies of whales, the particles of human industry and the organic scraps of ordinary life. It lets them settle into records, meals, sediments, and futures. It is not passive in the sense of lifelessness. It is receptive in the sense of scale. Receptivity can be active. Mud can be alive with microbes. Sediment can be moved by animals. A track can open a new microhabitat. A burrow can alter oxygen penetration. A body can become a feast. A nodule can create structure. The plain is a living receiver. The camera shows only the surface of that receiving. Imagine pushing a transparent tube into the sediment and bringing up a core. At the top is the present, disturbed slightly by the act of sampling. Below it are layers from years before the ship was built. Below that, centuries, deeper, perhaps tens of thousands of years, a smear of ash from an eruption. A shift in microfossils, a chemical signal from a different climate state. Clay that settled while human ancestors lived in different landscapes. Carbonates that dissolved or survived depending on ocean chemistry. The core is narrow enough to hold, but it contains time too wide to hold. This is the abyssal contradiction. Everything is vast, and the evidence is small. A square centimeter of mud can contain a world of organisms and a history of climates. A photograph of a nodule field can show a conflict between energy transition and conservation. A faint track can reveal movement in a place once imagined as still. A single deep-sea specimen can alter understanding of evolution, biogeography, pressure adaptation, or life's limits. Small details carry the plain because no human can carry the whole. There is a temptation to think the abyssal plain is monotonous. In some ways, it is. Repetition is part of its power. Long stretches of sediment can appear similar. The mind may tire. But monotony is often a failure of attention at distance. A prairie seen from an airplane may look like a sheet of color. Inside it, grasses differ. Insects move. Birds nest. Soils change. Water gathers in low places. Fire histories shape what grows. The abyssal plain, too, holds variation that does not appear in the first glance. One region may be richer in nodules. Another may be softer, more sedimented, more dominated by deposit feeders. One current regime may deliver more food, another may be more oxygen poor. One plane may lie under productive surface waters, receiving more organic rain. Another may lie under ocean deserts, starving more quietly. A fracture zone may interrupt the flatness. A buried feature may shape currents. A nearby seamount may act as an island for deep life. The broad word plain hides many neighborhoods. But the neighborhoods are not named like ours. They are known through coordinates, sampling stations, cruise numbers, project names, mineral provinces, biological records, depth ranges. Some are known more intimately by the scientists who have watched hours of footage or sorted specimens under ship lights at night. A place may exist in someone's memory as Station 12, where the sediment was unusually soft, where the holothurians were abundant, where a strange sponge appeared, where the ROV lost visibility in a cloud of mud, where a camera caught an animal no one on deck could identify. Scientific place names can sound cold, but often they hold tenderness. A sample label may be the first form of care available to a place no one can visit casually. The history of the abyssal plain is partly a history of instruments becoming more patient than people. A human eye cannot remain at 4,000 meters, but a camera can wait. A human body cannot cross the plain, but an autonomous vehicle can fly above it with sonar. A person cannot smell the chemical traces in deep water, but sensors can measure them. A scientist cannot see microbes in the mud by looking, but sequencing can reveal communities. The abyss becomes knowable through extensions of the body. Each instrument carries a human desire. The desire to map, to see, to sample, to measure, to return, to compare, to understand. But the instrument also carries human limitations. It can fail, it can disturb, it sees only what it is designed to see. A camera sees visible things, sonar sees shape, a core sees what fits in the tube, a trawl gathers bodies and destroys arrangement. A baited camera sees attraction to food, not everything that avoids it. A satellite sees the ocean surface and infers the seafloor indirectly. There is no instrument that simply reveals the abyss. There are instruments that negotiate with it. The abyss sets terms. Pressure is one term. Darkness is another. Distance is another. Cost is another. Uncertainty is another. You do not study the abyssal plain by deciding to look and then looking. You need a ship. Weather, funding, people trained in engineering, biology, geology, chemistry, navigation, data management. You need time at sea, which is never cheap. You need permission. You need backup systems. You need a plan for failure. You need patience when a cable tangles, when a sensor fails, when the bottom is not where expected, when the footage is mostly mud, when the sample is contaminated, when the animal collapses at the surface because its body belonged to pressure. The abyss is close, but it makes knowledge expensive. That expense shapes what we know. Places near wealthy research institutions, strategic interests, mineral prospects, or charismatic features may be studied more often. Other areas remain empty in the record, not because they lack life or importance, but because no expedition has lingered there. Data gaps become mistaken for biological gaps. The map of knowledge becomes confused with the map of reality. A species may appear rare because it has rarely been looked for. A habitat may seem simple because the right instrument has not visited. A process may seem absent because no one has measured it over the right season or decade. The abyssal plain is not only underexplored, it is unevenly explored. That unevenness matters when humans plan to use it. A decision made from sparse data can feel precise because it is dressed in numbers, but precision is not the same as completeness. A coordinate can be exact. The understanding attached to it may be thin. The plain asks us to distinguish between the accuracy of a point and the depth of a relationship. A point on a map does not know its own ecology. We have to learn it. And learning requires returning. Again and again. Not only once for discovery, once for baseline, once for impact assessment, then a permit. A living system changes. Food falls differently across seasons and years. Currents shift. Populations pulse. Rare events matter. Recovery cannot be inferred from impatience. The abyssal plain requires long-term observation, and long-term observation is one of the hardest things for short-term cultures to fund. It is easier to pay for a dramatic descent than for decades of quiet watching. But the quiet watching may be the real exploration. Consider an animal track, a line across sediment. It may curve. It may loop. It may end under a small mound. It is not spectacular. It has no teeth, no glow, no face. But it contains movement, decision, perhaps hunger, perhaps avoidance, perhaps the search for organic matter. It is the record of a body interacting with a surface. If similar tracks appear across a field, they can reveal patterns of activity. If they vanish after disturbance, that absence can reveal damage. If they return after years, recovery may be possible. If they do not, the mark of loss remains in the lack of marks. Absence can be evidence, but only if someone has watched long enough to know what should be there. The abyssal plain is full of absences we do not yet know how to interpret. That is frightening, not with the fear of sudden attack, with the fear of being too late to understand what vanished. A world can be erased quietly if it was quiet to begin with. That is why the first image matters. Dust in a beam, a sea cucumber, a flat floor, a small animal passing just beyond the light. The scene does not explain itself. It offers no easy emotional handle. It must be given time, and in that time, the viewer of the footage has to change. The human eye must stop demanding spectacle. The mind must begin to accept slow evidence. The heart, if it enters at all, must enter through humility rather than excitement. The abyssal plain is not asking to be loved like a coral reef. It cannot compete in color. It does not need to. Its beauty is austere, almost resistant. A beauty of scale, darkness, subtle movement, sedimented time, life continuing where our instincts expect little. A beauty that may take a long time to recognize, and once recognized, becomes difficult to dismiss. Some places become beautiful only after they have changed the speed of your attention. The abyssal plain is one of them. The animals of the abyssal plain do not live in a world of landmarks the way we do. On land, a tree can be a meeting point. A rock can hold warmth. A ridge can define a valley. A river can draw animals into its corridor. A house can stand where memory gathers, but on an abyssal plain, the nearest enduring structure may be a nodule, a sponge, a small rise in sediment, the edge of a feeding trace, a shell fragment, the skeleton of something that fell from above. The scale of place is compressed into smaller and stranger forms. To a brittle star, a current is geography. To a worm, the sediment's oxygen gradient is weather. To a bacterium, a particle of organic matter is a continent. To a sponge, a stone is a foundation. To a scavenger, the scent of a carcass is a road. Human maps, with their sweeping color gradients and named basins, are almost useless at the scale of an animal searching for food in the mud. The abyssal plain contains many maps at once. The map of depth, the map of current, the map of food, the map of oxygen, the map of sediment grain, the map of chemical traces, the map of surfaces where a larva can settle, the map of danger. Only some of these maps are visible to us, and often only after we build machines that can translate them. It is possible that the plain is full of directions we cannot sense, a faint gradient of smell in water, the pressure wave of a moving body, a chemical hint from decaying tissue far away, a vibration carried through sediment, the slight difference between soft mud that can be entered and mud that cannot. the presence of microbes on a particle, the shadow of a structure against a current. We often say the abyss is dark as though darkness is the central limitation for all life there. But darkness is mainly our problem. Many creatures have made other senses primary. Some have reduced eyes, some have heightened chemosensory abilities, some respond to touch, vibration, pressure, or the faintest light made by other organisms. They live in a world where information does not come through daylight and color in the way it does for us. The deep is not information poor. It is human sense poor. That distinction matters. The plane is not blank because we cannot read it quickly. It is written in other media. A fish passes through the camera's beam. It is pale, almost colorless in the artificial light, shaped by a life without sun. It stops for a moment above the sediment, fins making adjustments so subtle they seem like thought. Its body is not built for beauty in our terms, though it may become beautiful if we look without demanding familiarity. Its eyes may be large or reduced depending on species and depth. Its mouth may reveal a life of opportunistic feeding. Its muscles may be soft. Its bones may be light. Its existence is a series of answers to questions the surface never asks. How do you find food when food is rare? How do you move without wasting energy? How do you reproduce when encounters are scarce? How do you keep body chemistry stable under pressure? How do you sense the world when the sun is absent? How do you live on a plane that seems endless? Every deep-sea organism is an essay in constraint, not an essay written for us. An essay written by survival itself. There is tenderness in that if we let there be. The abyss can make life look harsh, and it is harsh in many ways. Cold, pressure, scarcity, darkness. But harshness is not the same as ugliness. A creature adapted to severe conditions carries a kind of elegance that may not match surface standards. Its body is not wrong because it seems strange to us. It is exact in relation to its world. The wrongness belongs to our expectation. A sea pig moving across abyssal sediment may look comical in a photograph, with swollen body and little tube feet, but it is not a joke. It is a deep-sea holothurian, a deposit feeder, part of the plane's slow processing of organic material. Its body is a tool for life in soft sediment. It belongs there more completely than any human belongs on a sidewalk. A brittle star raising arms into the current may look delicate, but delicacy down here is not weakness, it is function. A sponge may look stationary and simple, but it filters, hosts, shelters, changes flow, creates structure. The plane is full of lives that become smaller when turned into captions. A caption says, sea cucumber. The animal says, entire way of being. Scientists have to name things. Names allow comparison, conservation, law, memory, communication, but the act of naming can create a false sense of completion. Once a species has a Latin name, it can feel known. Yet its life may remain almost mysterious. How long does it live? How far do its larvae travel? What does it eat through the year? What eats it? What pressure range can it tolerate? How does it respond to disturbance, noise, sediment plumes, warming, lower oxygen, contaminants? Does it depend on nodules, burrows, carcasses, microbial films, currents? How many generations would recovery require? A name is a doorway, not a room. In the abyssal plane, many doorways are still missing. Most species are undescribed. Many are known from fragments, from a few individuals, from images, from genetic traces, from sampling so sparse that distribution remains almost guesswork. The plane's biodiversity is not absent, it is undercounted. Every expedition can bring surprises, not because the abyss is trying to be mysterious, but because we have visited so little of it with sufficient attention. To a species without a name, extinction would be a silence without obituary. No headline, no memory, no farewell, only the disappearance of a way of living that never entered human language. This thought should not be used for despair alone. It should be used for caution. The abyssal plain is one of the greatest reminders that the living world is larger than the known world. Conservation cannot wait until every organism is famous. Fame is not an ecological category. A species does not need charisma to have a role. A tiny worm in sediment may matter in ways that cannot be photographed. A microbe may do chemistry essential to the transformation of matter. A small attached organism on a nodule may be part of a network of life that disappears if the surface is removed. The abyss asks whether care can extend beyond recognition. This is not easy. Human empathy likes faces. Eyes, mammals, birds, clear expressions. Motion at our speed. Suffering we can read quickly. The abyssal plain offers few of these advantages. Many of its animals are small, strange, soft, slow, faceless to us, or hidden in sediment. They do not call out in ways we hear. They do not look back with expressions we understand. They cannot become symbols easily, and yet they are lives. Not symbolic lives, actual lives. This is where philosophy enters quietly through biology. If a creature has no human-like face, does its world matter less? If a habitat is dark, does it deserve less care? If recovery takes centuries, can our short attention be trusted to judge acceptable damage? If a community is difficult to photograph, is it easier to sacrifice? If a place is too deep for tourists, too plain for postcards, too quiet for spectacle, can it still be protected with seriousness? The abyssal plain turns ethical questions into physical ones. Darkness becomes a test. We have often expanded moral attention through visibility. A photograph of Earth from space changed the way people imagined the planet. Images of forests burning, ice melting, oil-covered birds, stranded whales, bleached reefs, and polluted rivers have shaped public feeling. Seeing can enlarge care, but the abyss complicates this relationship because it cannot be seen easily, and when seen, it may not produce immediate emotional recognition. A gray plain does not plead. A nodule field does not look wounded until you know what it is. A disturbed sediment track may look like a line unless you understand that the line may remain longer than a human life. The abyss needs an ethics that does not depend entirely on spectacle. It needs informed imagination. The ability to feel consequence before the perfect image arrives. That may be one of the hardest things a visual culture can learn. We are surrounded by images. We trust what can be shown. We doubt what feels abstract. We scroll past worlds faster than a deep sea animal crosses a small patch of mud. The abyssal plain asks for the opposite motion. It asks for slow watching, slow thinking, slow decision. It asks us not to mistake low drama for low importance. A small example. A polymetallic nodule lies half buried in sediment. It is dark, uneven, unremarkable to an untrained eye. On its upper surface, perhaps something lives, attached where hard substrate allows. Around it, sediment chemistry differs slightly. Under it, tiny animals may shelter. Its shape affects the way particles settle. It has grown for millions of years, layer upon layer, as metals accumulated from seawater or sediment pore waters. To remove it is not like picking up a pebble from a gravel road. It is closer to removing an old tree from a plain where trees are almost absent, except the tree grows too slowly for the comparison to satisfy. The nodule is not alive in the way the sponge is alive, but it participates in life. The abyss is full of such participation. Dead whale bones host communities. Shells become surfaces. Burrows change chemistry. Fecal pellets carry carbon. Microbial mats feed animals. A current passing over a small rise can concentrate particles. A rock dropped from a melting iceberg can provide rare attachment in sediment. Life uses what the plain offers, and what the plain offers is often subtle. The difference between mud and mud with one hard surface can be everything. This is why the word habitat must be handled carefully. On land, habitat is easy to imagine as a forest, reef, meadow, wetland in the abyss. Habitat may be a gradient, a particle field, a nodule, an oxygen depth, a carcass, a chemical seep, a patch of sediment with the right grain and organic content. It may not have boundaries the eye can see. It may appear to humans only when it is disturbed and something fails to return. The animals of the abyssal plain also remind us that scarcity does not eliminate complexity. Food limitation can reduce biomass, but not necessarily simplify relationships to the point of nothingness. Scarcity can create specialized strategies, long-distance sensing, opportunistic feeding, slow life histories, episodic abundance around falls, dependence on small structures, and delicate balances between energy gained and energy spent. An animal may live by moving very little until a chemical signal arrives. Another may filter low concentrations of particles for years. Another may process sediment, grain by grain. Another may appear suddenly at a carcass from distances that imply a hidden sensory world. Scarcity makes life inventive. It also makes disturbance more dangerous. If energy is limited, recovery from stress may be slow. If reproduction is infrequent, populations may rebound slowly. If larvae need rare settlement surfaces, removal of those surfaces may break a life cycle. If animals depend on thin layers of oxygenated sediment, burial by plumes may matter. If communities are patchy and dispersal uncertain, a damaged area may not be easily recolonized. The abyssal plain does not need high density to need protection. A sparse world can still be intricate. A field of nodules in the Clarion-Clipperton zone may look at first like stones scattered over silt, but biological surveys have revealed that many animals there are undescribed, and that the nodules support organisms needing hard surfaces in a soft sediment environment. Some species may occur only in certain regions. Some may have ranges wider than we know. The uncertainty cuts both ways, which is exactly why precaution matters. Unknown abundance is not the same as safety. Unknown rarity is not the same as inevitability. The point is that we do not yet know enough to treat damage as fully predictable. A map of mineral richness is not a map of ecological replaceability. And even if a species exists elsewhere, the removal of a local community matters. The plain is not just a collection of interchangeable organisms. It is arrangement, relationship, place. A life somewhere else does not replace the life here. This is true on land too, but the abyss makes us say it more carefully. Because here is difficult to feel in darkness. The camera pans, and the beam finds a small sponge. Its body is pale, lifted just above the sediment, a quiet architecture in a world where architecture is rare. It does not move when the light reaches it. It simply filters, or seems to. Its stillness is not inactivity. Water passes through it. Particles are captured. Microbes may live with it. Tiny animals may use it as refuge. Its presence changes the local flow of water. It is both organism and structure. How old is it? The camera cannot tell. How many times has food passed through it? How many larvae have failed to find a surface like this one? How many storms at the surface have delivered particles to its body? How many ships have crossed above without knowing it existed? The sponge does not answer. The plain keeps its quiet. It is tempting to call the abyssal plain lifeless, because life there does not reassure us. But reassurance is not a requirement of life. Life can be unfamiliar. Life can be slow. Life can be rare. Life can be microbial, hidden, intermittent, pale, soft, chemical, burrowing, attached to rocks, passing through darkness once and never seen again. The surface world taught us certain expectations: green leaves, moving animals, songs, tracks in snow, flowers, fur, wings, the smell of soil after rain. The abyssal plain has none of these. It offers silt, water, cold, pressure, and the soft persistence of organisms whose beauty is not arranged for human eyes. To understand it, we have to let life be less theatrical. Perhaps that is why deep sea footage can feel almost sacred when watched long enough. Not because it is religious, because the ordinary filters of human importance begin to loosen. No building, no road, no human face, no sky, no weather, no language, no sound in the room except the hum of equipment or the breath of someone watching. And on the screen, a small animal moves through a place almost no one has seen. It moves without knowing it is being witnessed. It moves because it lives there. There is something pure in that lack of performance. A life not asking to be meaningful. A place not arranging itself for us. The abyssal plain is full of such lives, and their indifference can become a form of teaching. Not everything exists to enter our story. Some things exist in their own darkness, under their own pressures, through their own economies of hunger and patience. To encounter them is not to absorb them into human meaning, but to recognize the limits of human centrality. Half the planet, and almost none of it built around us. That fact should not diminish us. It should relieve us. It means the world is larger than the theater of our anxieties, larger than politics, markets, identities, memories, achievements, failures, larger than land, larger than light. Under the blue surface lies a plain where a sea cucumber is doing its slow work, indifferent to the names of empires, indifferent to the noise of our arguments, yet not disconnected from our consequences. The deep does not need us to matter, but now that our consequences reach it, it may need us to become wiser than we have been. A pale amphipod moves across the sediment and vanishes under the edge of a nodule. For a moment, that is the whole world. Mud, stone, animal, dark water. A faint fall of particles. Nothing else is required for the abyss to be real. There is a moment in deep ocean exploration when the seafloor begins to appear not as an object, but as a weathered surface of time. The vehicle descends through black water. For hours, there is no bottom. Only particles in the lights, occasional animals, sensor readings, the constant persuasion of depth. Then, the altimeter begins to change. The bottom is near. A pale shape rises out of the darkness, not upward like a mountain, but into being, as if the machine's light is developing a photograph that has been waiting for millions of years. The plane appears first as haze, then tone, then texture, then ground. Ground, the word feels strange underwater. Ground is what steadies a foot. Ground is what buildings require. Ground is what gives humans the illusion of a fixed world. But abyssal ground is different. It is soft, often fine-grained, quietly mobile under biological touch, yet steady enough to hold records for ages. It is not solid like granite. It is not empty like open water. It is a threshold, a skin between the ocean above and the sediments below, where life works on falling matter before burial completes the story. The first contact is almost always smaller than the expectation. After so much descent, after such a long vertical crossing, the seafloor can look modest. A muted surface, a few animals, no revelation exploding into the frame. But the modesty is the revelation. The abyssal plain does not care that the journey to reach it was difficult. It does not greet the machine. It does not arrange a climax. It simply continues. This is one of the places where cinematic imagination must be disciplined. Abyssal truth is not always dramatic in the first second. Sometimes the camera reaches the bottom of half a planet and finds a patch of sediment the size of a table. Then, the work begins. The work is looking long enough for the patch to become immense. A table-sized area of abyssal plain can contain more history than a cathedral. A cathedral gathers human labor, faith, architecture, memory, sound, grief, ceremony. Its stones were cut, lifted, placed, its windows gather light. It belongs to a civilization. Abyssal sediment belongs to a different order. It may contain microfossils from seas that no longer exist in that form, dust from climates unlike ours, ash from eruptions, chemical signs of changing oceans, particles that fell before the languages now spoken on land had begun. The sediment is not meaningful because it resembles a human monument. It is meaningful because it is a non-human monument, built without intention by the accumulation of the world. No one designed it. No one had to. Time designed it by repetition. A grain falls. Another falls. 1,000 years gather. 1,000,000. The surface changes. Ice advances. Ice retreats. Species evolve. Species vanish. Rivers shift. Continents weather. Volcanoes erupt. The ocean circulates. The abyss receives. The plane is what happens when the planet keeps a diary in particles. But a diary can be disturbed. A sediment core taken carefully can read the diary. A machine dragging across the bottom can tear pages from it. A plume can blur lines. A track can write over older traces. Human disturbance is not only ecological, it can be historical. It can damage records that help us understand climate, ocean chemistry, extinction, and the long rhythms of Earth. The plane is both habitat and archive, and those roles are not separate. Animals live in the archive. The archive contains the evidence of animals. The top layers are active, breathing, burrowed, altered by life. To treat abyssal mud as inert is to misunderstand mud. Mud can be inhabited. Mud can be read. Mud can be changed. Mud can matter. The word mud itself carries prejudice. On land, mud often means mess, inconvenience, dirt on shoes, something to wash away. In the abyss, mud is habitat. It is surface, shelter, food matrix, chemical reactor, burial ground, memory. Its fine particles create a world where small differences become important. Too little oxygen, and certain animals cannot penetrate. Too little organic matter, and food webs thin. Different minerals, different microbes, different grain sizes, different burrow stability. A change in deposition can reshape who can live there. The mud is not background. It is the stage and part of the cast. A worm moving through it alters its chemistry. A sea cucumber processing it changes its texture. Microbes within it transform organic matter. A track across it records movement. A nodule resting on it creates contrast. A dead body landing on it creates a temporary city. Everything down here happens with the mud, not merely on it. This is hard to see because the mud does not look alive. But many living systems do not look alive at the scale where our eyes first meet them. Soil, too, can look like dirt until magnified by knowledge. A forest floor can seem like debris until one learns decomposition. A coral reef can seem like stone until one understands the animals. The abyssal plane requires the same shift, only deeper. It asks us to move from surface appearance into process. Process is where the abyss becomes extraordinary, not because every moment is dramatic. Because every quiet moment belongs to cycles larger than sight. The camera watches a deposit feeder move. It ingests sediment, extracting what nutrition it can, leaving behind processed traces. That one action is small. Multiplied across vast areas and long times, similar actions shape the upper sediment, affect carbon burial, redistribute particles, change microbial access to organic matter. A small animal becomes part of a planetary process without ever becoming large. The abyss is built from smallness, repeated beyond comprehension. This is also true of mapping. A single sonar line across the ocean is a thread. Another line crosses it. Another fills the gap. A ship maps a swath. An autonomous vehicle maps finer detail. Data are corrected, processed, checked. A global bathymetric picture grows not in one heroic act, but in accumulated traces, much like sediment itself. Seabed 2030 and similar efforts turn ship tracks into planetary knowledge, but even when a percentage rises, the abyss remains more than a percentage. Modern mapped area does not equal intimate understanding. Still, each swath reduces one kind of ignorance. There is beauty in the patience of mapping. A ship moving across a dark basin at night, sonar pulsing into kilometers of water, is a kind of listening. The sound travels downward, reflects from the seafloor, returns altered by shape. The ship does not see the plane. It hears enough to draw it. Hidden ground becomes data, then color, then relief. A rise appears, a depression, a channel, a field of abyssal hills where a plane was expected, a fault, a scar. The ocean replies in echoes. But echoes are not voices. They give shape, not life. The difference is crucial. A map can show that a region is flat. It cannot show that a transparent animal is drifting just above the sediment, or that a sponge is anchored to a nodule, or that a microbial community is turning the remains of surface life into chemistry. For that, other forms of exploration must follow. Cameras, samples, environmental data. Long-term observatories. Careful repeated surveys. Baseline studies. Experiments designed not merely to reveal resource potential, but to understand vulnerability. The abyssal plane needs layered knowledge because it is itself layered. A bathymetric layer, a sediment layer, a biological layer, a chemical layer, a temporal layer, a political layer, a moral layer. We flatten it at our peril. Long ago, when sailors took soundings with weighted lines, the bottom sometimes came up attached to the weight. Ooze, sand, shell fragments, mud. Those bits were clues. The deep began to enter human knowledge not as a view, but as residue. A smear on lead, a sample on deck. A sign that beneath the water there was a surface with its own composition. The 19th century Challenger expedition expanded this knowledge dramatically, collecting samples, measuring depths, cataloging life. The idea that the deep sea was lifeless began to weaken under evidence. The abyss was not a void. It had animals. It had sediments. It had shape. Yet evidence did not immediately become cultural intimacy. Knowledge can enter science long before it enters ordinary imagination. The deep remained distant because it could not be visited in the way mountains or forests could. It was known by specialists, instruments, preserved specimens, black and white diagrams, reports. The public ocean remained waves. Storms, ships, whales, reefs, beaches, horizons. The abyssal plane stayed behind the word deep. The word deep is too small. It collapses everything beneath a few hundred meters into one emotional category. Deep water, deep sea, deep ocean. But the descent from the surface to the abyssal plane passes through radically different worlds. Sunlight zone, twilight zone, midnight zone, abyss. Each layer has its own rules. The plane is not merely far down. It is the receiver beneath a vertical chain of transformation. By the time material reaches it, it has passed through mouths and microbes, through pressure and cold, through darkness and delay. Deep is not one place. It is a sequence of negotiations. The abyssal plane is where many of those negotiations leave their final visible marks. A particle that began in sunlight may arrive as food. A larva may settle or fail. A current may sweep or deposit. A chemical gradient may deepen. An animal may pass, feed, burrow, die. The plane is the lower handwriting of the whole ocean. To say it covers half the planet is therefore not merely to say that a large area is flat. It is to say that a large part of Earth's surface is a receiving surface for the ocean above it. A vast, dark interface where the biological and geological histories of the sea settle are transformed and become part of the planet's longer memory. It is to say that much of Earth is not mountain, forest, city, ice, desert, farmland, or coral reef. Much of Earth is sedimented darkness under pressure. This is a fact that changes the emotional shape of home. Home is not only the places where humans can stand. Home includes the places we cannot survive. The abyssal plain belongs to Earth as fully as any valley, maybe more fully, if scale is the measure. But scale is not the only measure. A garden matters though it is small. A childhood room matters though it occupies little space. A tide pool matters though it can be crossed in one step. Still, scale has its own power. Half the planet hidden in darkness means human familiarity is a thin achievement. We know the world through a narrow band of conditions: air pressure near 1 atmosphere, temperatures our bodies tolerate, light our eyes evolve to use, ground solid enough for walking. The abyssal plain is Earth outside those conditions. Not alien, Earth, but Earth without our permissions. That may be why the abyssal plain feels philosophical even before any philosophy is spoken. It reveals that our planet is not scaled to human experience. The places most available to us are not necessarily the places that dominate the surface. The bright world is not the whole world. The maps of civilization are not the maps of being. Under the ocean lies a physical reminder that importance and visibility have never been the same. The plain does not need to be seen to occupy space. It does not need to be named to host life. It does not need to be useful to have history. These are simple sentences. Human societies often fail them. When the camera's lights sweep across the seafloor, they reveal a tiny fraction of an enormous fact. A patch of sediment here. A rock there. An animal moving slowly. If the camera rises and travels, the pattern repeats with variation. Mud, nodules, tracks, animals, a small slope, a depression, another field, another unknown. The vehicle's log records distance. The viewer may feel little change, but outside the frame, the plain extends farther than any journey in a single dive can suggest. This is one of the central visual problems of the abyss. How do you film vastness without horizon? On land, vastness can be shown by distance, a figure against a desert, a road disappearing, mountains layered in haze. In the abyss, the water and darkness prevent that kind of view. The vastness is known by data, not by sight. The frame is always intimate, even when the landscape is enormous. A camera in the abyss shows rooms inside a continent. It shows corners of an empire of sediment. The imagination has to supply the rest carefully, not by inventing, but by extending the scale beyond what the beam can show. The beam is honest about its limits. It reveals a circle and admits darkness around it. Perhaps that is why deep sea footage can be more truthful than some brightly lit landscapes. It never pretends to show everything. It cannot. The black edge of the frame is always saying, "There is more." Every image carries its own confession. The visible is surrounded by the unknown. This should make us cautious with certainty. It should also keep wonder alive. A plain that looks uniform may hide a rare animal outside the light. A nodule field may hold species not yet described. A soft sediment region may contain microbial processes critical to carbon cycling. A track may lead to behavior not yet understood. A faint chemical signal may indicate a seep. A small rise may change current enough to concentrate food. A dead whale, if it falls, may transform the local world. The abyss is not empty between discoveries. It is undiscovered between observations. That distinction is more than wordplay. Empty is a claim about the world. Undiscovered is a claim about us. One erases, the other humbles. The abyssal plain has suffered from the first word too often. Empty, barren, desert, wasteland, mud, resource area. Bottom. These words are not always false, but they can become dangerous when used without attention. A desert can be alive. Mud can be habitat. A bottom can be a living surface. A resource area can be someone else's world. Language prepares action. If we speak of the plain as empty, heavy machines become easier to imagine. If we speak of it as a living archive, restraint becomes easier to defend. Neither phrase should become propaganda. The plain is not a sentimental garden. It is cold, dark, sparse in many places, and difficult. But difficulty and sparseness do not cancel value. They define a different kind of value. A sparse world teaches that life does not always gather where we can admire it. Sometimes it spreads thinly over immensity. Sometimes its dignity lies in persistence rather than display. Sometimes its greatest drama is not what happens in a minute, but what continues for millions of years. The abyssal plain is made of continuation. The camera eventually lifts from the bottom. The legs rise. Sediment drifts back into the small depressions left by contact, though not completely. A faint mark remains. The vehicle ascends a meter, then 10. The seafloor falls away into a pale sheet. At a certain height, detail vanishes. The mud becomes tone. The animals disappear into invisibility. The plain becomes abstract again. This happens in thought too. When we step back too far, living detail becomes category. The work is to move between scales without losing either. Half the planet, one sea cucumber. Both are true. Half the planet gives awe. One sea cucumber gives responsibility. Awe without responsibility becomes consumption. Responsibility without awe becomes paperwork. The abyssal plain needs both. The plain remains below as the vehicle rises. Its lights catch particles in the water. The bottom fades. Soon there is only black again. Then later, if the ascent continues, a faint change in darkness. A return through layers. A blue memory of the surface. The underside of waves. The bright injury of day. On deck, people will handle data, samples, footage, numbers. They will speak, compare, classify. The plain will be converted into human forms of knowledge. But below, the sediment settles. The animals resume. The darkness closes without resentment. The plain continues. It was never waiting for us. It was only there. There is another way to enter the abyssal plain. Not by descending from the surface, but by imagining the surface removed. Let the clouds vanish first. Let the weather lift away. Let the sunlight remain, but take away the glitter that hides depth. Then, let the ocean itself become transparent, not absent, just visible through all its kilometers, as if the planet had become a glass vessel. Suddenly, the familiar blue world would fill with hidden architecture. Continental shelves would slope into darker basins. Submarine canyons would cut downward from the edges of continents. Mid-ocean ridges would rise in long volcanic seams. Seamounts would stand like drowned mountains. Trenches would fall into narrow darkness. And between these shapes, the plains would appear. Wide, muted, almost unbelievably smooth. Not flat in the lazy sense. Flat in the way a long silence can be flat while still containing emotion. The Atlantic would reveal broad floors softened by sediment washed and carried from continents. The Pacific would show abyssal expanses interrupted by fracture zones and seamounts, some with fields of nodules lying under water so deep that the surface is a separate climate. The Indian Ocean would open basins where plains spread between ridges and margins. The Southern Ocean would show cold circulation feeding the deep. The Arctic, smaller and enclosed in its own way, would have its own hidden floors under ice in season. The world would no longer seem mostly land and ocean. It would seem mostly depth. We have mistaken the surface of the sea for the ocean because the surface is the only part that comes to meet us. The abyssal plain never comes to meet us. It stays where it is. That is its power and its problem. The sea surface is expressive. It changes color with weather. It breaks against rock. It carries ships. It reflects moonlight. It can be calm, violent, glittering, gray, green, black, silver, glassy, broken. It enters poetry easily because it behaves in ways the human body can witness. The abyssal plain has no such theatrical surface. Its changes are hidden beneath kilometers of opacity. It has no waves for poets, no storms for painters, no horizon for travelers, no shore where a child can stand. And yet it is the larger landscape. This reversal is difficult to absorb. The part that meets us is thin. The part that defines the planet is hidden. The abyssal plain also changes the meaning of the word beneath. Beneath usually suggests lower importance. Beneath notice. Beneath dignity. Beneath concern. The word carries hierarchy. Above is light, heaven, aspiration, progress. Below is grave, basement, underworld, danger, repression. Human language is full of vertical prejudice. The abyssal plain forces a correction. Beneath can mean foundational. Beneath can mean vast. Beneath can mean not lesser, but less available. Beneath can mean the hidden majority. Perhaps this is why ancient cultures filled depth with spirits, monsters, drowned cities, underworlds, gods of the sea. The imagination felt something true even when the science was absent. Below the surface, ordinary rules weaken. A person can float at the boundary and sense a volume they cannot see. Deep water creates metaphysical pressure before physical pressure is understood. The abyssal plain is not a myth, but it occupies the space where myth once stood. We used monsters to mark what we could not measure. Now we have meters, sonar, submersibles, satellites, pressure housings, sediment cores, DNA sequencing, global mapping projects. The monsters have mostly retreated. The mystery has not. In some ways, measurement makes the mystery more precise. It is one thing to imagine a bottomless sea. It is another to know that beneath a particular coordinate lies a plain at 4,800 meters, with sediment accumulating slowly, with oxygen levels measurable, with polymetallic nodules in certain densities, with animals filmed in low numbers, with microbial communities processing carbon, with human mining interest increasing. Precision does not reduce awe, it gives awe a skeleton. Abyssal science can be poetic without abandoning accuracy. The poetry is in the facts themselves. A plain covering much of the ocean floor, sediment falling for millions of years, animals living in permanent night, mineral nodules growing slower than civilizations rise and collapse. The surface feeding the deep with the dead. Half the planet hidden under water thick enough to erase sunlight. No exaggeration is needed. The trouble is that facts alone rarely change behavior. A fact can be accepted and emotionally ignored. People can know that the ocean covers most of Earth and still imagine the world as a collection of countries. People can know that deep sea life exists and still picture the bottom as empty. People can know that mapping is incomplete and still trust maps as if blankness were harmless. The abyssal plain needs a form of knowledge that enters feeling without becoming false. This is where storytelling matters. Not story as invention, story as arrangement. A way of letting scale, fact, image, and consequence move through time so the mind can hold them. The abyssal plain cannot be understood in a single statistic, any more than a forest can be understood by counting trees. It must unfold. It must be entered slowly. The camera must descend. The light must touch sediment. The animal must cross the frame. The map must widen. The nodule must become habitat. The mining machine must become imaginable. the silence must become active. Only then does half the planet begin to feel less like a number and more like a revelation. The revelation is not that the abyssal plains are remote, it is that they are ordinary to Earth. We are the remote ones. We live on the rare exposed surfaces, the continents rising into air, the shorelines, the islands, the narrow breathable margin. We live where liquid water is not overhead in crushing thickness. We live where sunlight arrives directly, where plants make color from light, where weather touches skin, where sound moves through air, where fire can exist. We experience these conditions as normal because they are ours. But from the perspective of planetary surface area, much of Earth does not resemble our normal at all. Our normal is local. The abyss is planetary. There is humility in reversing the perspective. Imagine the abyssal plain not as below us, but as the great surface of Earth, with the continents as rare elevations breaking into air. Imagine the bright world as a fringe around a darker majority. Imagine cities not as centers, but as thin crusts of light on isolated landmasses above a planet whose largest habitat is oceanic and whose largest plains are submerged. This does not diminish human culture. It relocates it. Civilization becomes coastal in the deepest sense, even far inland. It depends on an ocean it barely sees. It is surrounded by processes that do not need its stories to continue. The abyssal plain is part of that surrounding. This perspective can be unsettling because human identity often grows from centrality. We speak of nature as around us, environment as surrounding us, resources as available to us. Even when we try to be ecological, we can remain at the center of the sentence. The abyssal plain offers a different grammar. It exists without us, but not unaffected by us. It is not background, because background implies a foreground with humans in it. It is not stage, because stage implies performance. It is not resource, because resource implies use. It is not wilderness if wilderness means untouched, because our traces have already reached deep places. What word then? World. The plain is a world, not separate from Earth. Not separate from us entirely, but not reducible to us. A world does not need a sky. This world's ceiling is water, kilometers of it. The pressure at the bottom is not just a hazard for explorers, it is a basic condition for life there. Organisms have body chemistries adapted to it. Their membranes, proteins, and internal fluids function where ours fail. Bring some of them rapidly to the surface, and the transition itself can destroy the context that made them whole. The animal becomes a specimen under lights, but something has been lost in the ascent. Pressure was part of its body's truth. This is another difficulty of knowing the abyss. To study life, we often remove it from the conditions that make it alive. Even when necessary, this removal should trouble us. The surface laboratory is brilliant and incomplete. In a lab, scientists can sequence DNA, examine anatomy, measure chemistry, describe species, compare samples. They can discover relationships invisible in footage. They can detect contaminants. They can measure isotope signatures and infer diets. They can reveal microbial processes. But the lab cannot fully recreate the plain. It cannot reproduce the immense context of darkness, pressure, sediment, distance, low food, current and community. Experimental systems help. Pressure chambers help. In situ instruments help. But the abyss remains a place where knowledge must keep returning to place. A creature is not only its body, it is body and world. The abyssal plain reminds us that the world part matters. The same is true for the plain itself. A sediment sample on a ship is no longer the seafloor. It is material removed from arrangement. Its layers may be intact, but its relationships have been interrupted. The water above it, the current, the animals that moved through it, the chemical gradients in place, the pressure, the slow interaction with surrounding sediment, all of these are part of what the sample stood within. This does not make sampling wrong. It makes interpretation careful. Science at the abyss is full of such careful compromises. Take enough to know, but not so much that knowing becomes damage. Illuminate enough to see, but not so much that light changes behavior beyond usefulness. Disturb enough to measure response, but not so much that an experiment becomes a wound. Return often enough to understand change, but not so often that the act of returning becomes the main change. There is no pure observation. There is only responsible observation. Responsibility grows heavier with scale. If the abyssal plains were rare small features, disturbance might be contained by their scarcity, though still serious. But they are vast, and vast places invite industrial thinking. The very size of the plain can be used to argue that damage in one region is negligible. A few thousand square kilometers becomes small relative to millions. A mining track becomes a scratch. A plume becomes local. A lost species becomes unlikely. This argument depends on scale as anesthesia, but scale cuts both ways. A small percentage of a vast system can still be enormous. A local disturbance repeated across mining blocks can become regional. A scratch across a living surface can matter if recovery is measured in centuries. And no one lives inside an average. Animals live in exact places. The abyssal plain is too large for us to feel easily and too specific to treat abstractly. That is the tension. Half the planet, but each life somewhere. Each nodule somewhere. Each track somewhere. Each sampling station somewhere. Each plume somewhere. If we let the scale become too large, care dissolves. If we focus only on the small, we lose the awe that shows the system's importance. We need a double vision, the planet and the patch, the map and the mud, the percentage and the animal. This double vision may be the beginning of wisdom for deep-sea decisions. It is also the beginning of awe. Because awe is not only feeling small, it is feeling small in a way that expands rather than crushes. The abyssal plain can make human life seem thin, but it can also make Earth feel more generous, more various, more mysterious. A planet capable of forests and abyssal plains, of deserts and hydrothermal vents, of coral reefs and haddle trenches, of cities and microbial sediments, is not a simple home. It is a layered home. Its unfamiliarity is part of its richness. We do not lose belonging when the planet becomes larger than we imagined. We gain a truer belonging, one based not on dominance, but on participation. Participation is unavoidable now. For most of human history, the abyssal plain was affected by us only indirectly through distant processes. Now our participation is more explicit. We lay cables. We trawl in deep waters in some regions. We search for minerals. We send research vehicles. We alter climate. We change the chemistry of the ocean. We deposit plastics and pollutants. We create underwater noise. We build legal systems to govern what may happen in international seabed areas. We make decisions in conference rooms that can shape places no delegate will ever see. The abyssal plain has entered human governance. The question is whether human governance has truly entered the abyssal plain, not merely as jurisdiction, as understanding. International waters add another layer of complexity. Much of the abyssal seafloor lies beyond national borders, in areas considered the common heritage of humankind under international law. The phrase is noble and complicated. Common heritage can imply shared responsibility. It can also invite shared entitlement. If something belongs to everyone, who protects it from everyone? If benefits are to be shared, how are harms counted, especially harms to non-human life and future generations? If knowledge is incomplete, who has the authority to decide acceptable risk? The abyssal plain becomes a test not only of science, but of planetary politics. Can humanity govern a place that almost no human can visit? Can law respect a habitat without citizens? Can economics include recovery times longer than markets? Can precautions survive pressure from demand? These are not abstract questions. They are being asked now, in draft regulations, environmental impact assessments, scientific papers, public campaigns, corporate plans, and diplomatic negotiations. The abyssal plain is no longer outside history. It may never have been outside history. We were outside its. That is the shift. History, in human language, often begins when humans arrive. But abyssal history began with crust forming, sediment falling, currents shifting, organisms adapting, extinctions passing, climates changing. Human history has now entered that longer history as a disturbance and a possible caretaker. Which one we become is not decided by depth, it is decided by choices made at the surface. The plain cannot choose us. We choose how to arrive. A camera, a core, a map, a machine, a treaty, a restraint, a story. Each is an arrival. Some arrivals leave only brief light and data. Some may leave scars. Some may leave protection. The abyss will receive all of them as it receives everything, slowly, silently, without dramatic announcement. On the ship, after a dive, the deck is often noisy. Winches, voices, water draining, metal settling, people moving with the alert fatigue of long work. The vehicle comes aboard dripping from a world without air. Mud may cling to sampling gear. A specimen jar may be carried carefully. Data are backed up. Batteries are checked. Someone writes notes. Someone looks at the first images. Someone else may step outside and see the open sea, ordinary again, as if nothing below has changed. But the person has changed if the dive has done its work. The ocean's surface no longer looks like surface alone. It looks like distance over a world. The horizon remains beautiful, but the beauty is no longer shallow. It has depth beneath it. The wind across the deck, the gulls, if there are any, the sun on water, the smell of salt and machinery, all of it belongs to the same planet as the sediment plain below. The visible and invisible become one system in the mind. That integration may be the real gift of abyssal exploration, not just new facts. A new shape of attention. Attention changes scale. A person who has seen the abyssal plain on a screen may later stand beside the sea and think differently about the blue. The water no longer ends where the eye stops. The word ocean opens downward. A wave breaking on shore becomes the topmost movement of something huge and layered. A piece of plastic on the beach becomes not just local litter, but potential travel. A conversation about minerals becomes not just supply chains, but sediment and nodules and animals. A climate graph becomes not just temperature, but deep currents and carbon burial and oxygen in the dark. The abyss makes surface events heavier. It gives them depth. Perhaps that is why so many people feel drawn to the deep sea once they glimpse it. Not because it is comfortable, because it restores hidden dimensions to a flattened world. Modern life often compresses experience into screens, schedules, cities, markets, notifications, immediate opinions, rapid outrage, daily urgency. The abyssal plain moves at another rate. It reminds us that not everything important is immediate. Not everything real is visible. Not everything living is expressive. Not everything valuable can be priced before it is understood. Not everything unknown is waiting to be used. In a noisy age, the abyssal plain is almost unbearably quiet. That quiet can feel like judgment. It may also feel like mercy. Mercy, because it shows that the world continues beyond the little storms of the self. Judgment, because it shows that consequences continue too. Both are true. The plain is indifferent to our moods, but not immune to our actions. That is a difficult combination. It means we cannot demand emotional reciprocity from the abyss. It will not love us back. It will not thank us for restraint. It will not forgive or accuse. It will simply be altered or not altered, studied or not studied, protected or not protected, diminished or allowed to continue. The moral drama remains mostly ours. The physical reality remains mostly its own. Under the ship, far below the last light, a sea cucumber moves through sediment and leaves a track. The track curves slightly. A flake of marine snow settles near it. A microbe begins work. A current passes too slowly to be seen. A nodule rests in the mud, older than the languages above it. The plane extends beyond all beams, all charts, all metaphors. It is not empty. It is not scenery. It is Earth, in its dark majority. Continuing, the abyssal plane has a color problem, not because it lacks color completely, but because the colors that reach human eyes down there are mostly gifts from our own lamps. Without artificial light, the plane has no visible palette for us. It is not gray in the dark. It is not brown. It is not blue. Color belongs to light, and light belongs mostly to the surface. Down here, color becomes potential waiting for illumination, or signal produced by life, or chemistry revealed only by instruments. When a submersible's lights turn on, the sediment may appear beige, tan, gray, cream, sometimes faintly green or brown depending on composition and the camera's balance. Animals may appear white, pinkish, translucent, red, purple, or pale gold. Nodules appear dark, almost black, with rough surfaces. But this is not how the world looks to itself. The lamp is an interpreter with a bias toward the surface. It returns the abyss to a visual language humans can understand, but only temporarily. The abyssal plane, in its own condition, does not need to look like anything. That is difficult to accept. We are visual animals. We trust light. We trust edges. We trust color and contrast. We associate clarity with truth. A clear view feels like knowledge. The abyssal plane undermines this confidence. It exists mostly beyond ordinary seeing, yet it is not vague. It is physically exact. Its depth is exact. Its sediment chemistry is exact. Its animals have exact bodies. Its currents move in exact patterns, whether or not they can be seen. The world does not become less real because eyes fail. Human perception is not the measure of reality. The abyss proves this gently and absolutely. A lamp reveals a sea cucumber, and the mind says, now it exists. But it existed before the lamp. A sonar map reveals a plane, and the chart says, now it is known. But it held its shape before the echo. A species is named, and science says, now it enters record. But it had a lineage before the name. Much of the abyssal plane lives in this gap between existence and recognition. The gap is enormous. A tiny animal in sediment may have lived, fed, reproduced, and died for countless generations without human awareness. A microbial process may have contributed to carbon cycling long before a grant proposal described it. A nodule may have supported attachment for organisms through entire human civilizations that rose and fell above a sea they did not understand. The abyss does not wait for recognition. Recognition is our late arrival to ongoing reality. This should reshape the emotional meaning of discovery. Discovery is often celebrated as if the discovered thing has just entered the world. In truth, discovery is usually our correction. The thing was there. We were the ones absent. The abyssal plane is therefore not a realm of newness so much as a realm of late noticing. Late noticing can be beautiful. It can also be dangerous. Beautiful, because wonder arrives with humility. Dangerous, because if noticing comes too late, what is noticed may already be changed. Deep sea science is full of this urgency. Explore before extraction. Establish baselines before disturbance. Describe species before habitats are altered. Understand currents before sediment plumes are released. Measure recovery before assuming it. The plane's hiddenness means that the normal sequence of human behavior, use first, regret later, could be disastrous on timescales longer than the political memory of any nation. The abyssal plane does not offer quick forgiveness. A scar in soft sediment may not vanish soon. A removed nodule may not regrow in any meaningful human future. A damaged, slow-growing community may not recover in time to prove our optimism false before decisions have spread elsewhere. In the abyss, later is very late. Yet the plane is not only a warning, it is a teacher of proportion. Consider the age of a nodule. Some polymetallic nodules grow at rates of millimeters over millions of years depending on conditions. A person can hold one in a hand and feel its weight without feeling its time. It may look like a rock, but its layers accumulated while generations of surface life came and went. Human history, measured against its growth, becomes a quick disturbance of the upper atmosphere. A city can be founded, flourish, burn, rebuild, modernize, and be forgotten, while a nodule adds almost nothing visible to itself. This does not make human life trivial. It makes time larger. The abyssal plane is full of objects and processes that return human urgency to a wider scale: sediment accumulation, deep currents, plate motion, biological adaptation, recovery after disturbance. None of these obey the clock of ambition. The plane is an antidote to haste. But an antidote only works if taken. A culture can know that deep-sea systems are slow and still rush them. It can say the word precaution while designing extraction timelines. It can commission environmental studies while assuming the conclusion must permit activity. It can treat uncertainty as a temporary paperwork problem rather than a condition requiring restraint. The abyssal plane asks whether knowledge will actually slow power. That question is uncomfortable because the answer is not guaranteed. Humans can be moved by wonder and still behave destructively. We can make beautiful documentaries and poor policies. We can name species and damage habitats. We can map a place and then treat the map as permission. Wonder must become governance, or it remains decoration. Governance, in turn, must become imaginative enough to include the invisible. This is not easy in legal systems built around boundaries, ownership, measurable harm, and human stakeholders. How does one represent a sediment community? How does one calculate the loss of an undescribed species? How does one value a million-year-old nodule as habitat rather than ore? How does one assign responsibility for a plume whose effects spread through water and time? How does one require monitoring in a place where monitoring itself is difficult and expensive? How does one enforce limits in the high seas? The abyssal plane is not only a scientific frontier, it is a governance frontier. But the word frontier carries danger. Frontiers have often been stories told by those who arrive with power, not by those already living there. The abyss has residents. They are not human, but they are not nothing. Perhaps we need a new word. Not frontier, not wilderness, not resource, not emptiness. Maybe, simply, responsibility. The abyssal plane as responsibility. A responsibility large enough to humble extraction. A responsibility old enough to challenge haste. A responsibility obscure enough to test whether care can survive without applause. This kind of responsibility does not photograph easily. It does not trend. It does not provide quick emotional rewards. It is closer to stewardship in darkness, the decision to behave carefully toward a world that may never become familiar, may never thank us, may never be visible except in fragments. There is maturity in that. A civilization that can protect only what it can easily see is still young. The abyssal plane also asks for scientific courage, not the courage of dramatic danger alone, though deep sea work has real hazards and immense technical challenges. It asks for the courage to study what may seem boring to others, to spend years on sediment chemistry, small invertebrates, microbial rates, current patterns, taxonomy, plume modeling, baseline monitoring. To defend the importance of a mudplain to audiences hungry for sharks and shipwrecks, to say that an animal too small for most viewers to admire may matter. To insist that flatness is not absence. There is courage in patient attention. A researcher identifying tiny deep-sea organisms under a microscope may be doing work as adventurous, in its own register, as a pilot descending in a submersible. One brings back the image, the other builds the meaning. Without meaning, the image remains a strange scene. Without images, meaning struggles to enter public imagination. The abyss needs both. Science is not only the spectacular descent, it is the long sorting afterward. The careful notes. The uncertain identification. The sample preserved. The genetic sequence compared. The sediment grain measured. The map corrected. The question revised. The admission that more data are needed. The abyssal plane advances into knowledge through thousands of such acts, many of them quiet, many of them uncelebrated. The romance of exploration often focuses on the moment of arrival, but the real intimacy comes later, in repeated careful work. The plane becomes known not when the camera first touches bottom, but when many forms of attention begin to converge. Still, the first touch matters. There is something irreplaceable about the first image from an unseen place. A pale floor, a moving animal, a nodule field, a track. The image says, not in words, that the world is larger than its maps. It gives the mind an anchor. After that, statistics can attach to feeling. 70% of the ocean floor is no longer empty area. It is a surface like the one in the frame, multiplied beyond comprehension. 4,000 meters is no longer a number. It is the distance between the lamp and daylight. Marine snow is no longer a phrase. It is the particles crossing the beam. The first image does not explain everything. It permits relationship. Relationship begins with noticing. Noticing begins with humility. Humility begins when the plane does not behave like a stage. The camera records mud. The mind waits for revelation. The revelation is mud. And then, slowly, the mind changes. This is how the abyss works on us. Not by overwhelming the senses at once, but by outlasting our first impatience. The longer we look, the more our categories soften. Plain becomes habitat. Mud becomes archive. Stone becomes structure. Darkness becomes condition, not emptiness. Sparse life becomes adaptation. Slow movement becomes success. The bottom becomes a world. If the abyssal plains cover something like half the planet, then half the planet has been teaching this lesson without most of us knowing. The lesson has been happening under storms, under shipping routes, under wars, under songs, under migrations, under satellites, under all the bright noise of human time. While cities expanded, sediment fell. While empires argued over land, nodules grew. While children learned maps colored blue, animals moved in darkness across real floors. While rockets left Earth, cameras only rarely crossed enough water to see the plains below. This is not a competition between space and sea. Both are vast. Both are worthy of awe. But there is an irony in how easily humans turn their imagination upward, while the largest unexplored landscapes of our own planet remained beneath waves. Space offers distance that flatters ambition. The abyss offers proximity that humbles it. Looking up, we can imagine leaving. Looking down, we are reminded we have not yet understood home. The abyssal plane is home, but not domestic. It is home as planet, home as system, home as the part of Earth that does not comfort us, but still includes us. This broader home is hard to love because it does not fit the body. We cannot breathe it, walk it, warm ourselves there, shelter there, or harvest from it without risk. But belonging to Earth does not require bodily comfort in every part of Earth. A person belongs to a planet with molten mantle, polar ice, deserts, upper atmosphere, bacteria in rocks, storms, reefs, trenches. and abyssal plains. Belonging is not ownership, it is relation. The abyssal plain is part of the relation whether or not we visit. Every breath has an ocean behind it, not in a simplistic way, but in the real intertwined sense that the ocean regulates climate, participates in oxygen cycles, absorbs heat, stores carbon, and shapes weather. The abyssal plain is not the place where a person breathes, but it belongs to the ocean system that makes breath possible at the surface. The distance between a human lung and abyssal sediment is large physically, yet small ecologically when compared with the full planet. Matter moves. Energy moves. Consequence moves. The abyss is not separate from the room where someone opens a window. This connectedness is both beautiful and frightening. Beautiful, because it means the world is whole. Frightening, because it means damage can travel. A plastic fragment does not respect our categories. Neither does carbon dioxide. Neither does heat. Neither does sound in water. Neither do currents. We divide the world into zones because the mind needs order. Surface and deep. Coast and open ocean. National waters and high seas. Resource and habitat. Science and policy. But the ocean crosses these divisions constantly. The abyssal plain is downstream of many choices that did not imagine it. It receives the residue of categories that failed. Perhaps deep sea care begins by admitting that there is no away. There is only elsewhere. And elsewhere is inhabited. The camera moves now across a field of nodules. They appear in the lights one after another, dark rounded forms resting on pale sediment. Some are half buried, some cluster closely, some stand alone. The field resembles a landscape after a slow volcanic hailstorm, though the stones did not fall from above. They grew where they lie, layer by layer, through chemical patience. Between them, sediment fills the gaps. Animals move through the spaces. A sponge rises from one. A small organism clings to another. A fish passes over them, briefly shadowing their surfaces. The field is visually compelling because it offers texture, but the texture is also temptation. To human industry, the nodules are removable objects. They seem loose. They are not mountains to blast, not forests to cut, not ore buried deep underground. They lie on the surface as if waiting to be picked up. This apparent availability is dangerous because it hides formation time, ecological role, and recovery uncertainty. A thing can look easy to take and be impossible to replace. The abyssal plain is full of that contradiction. Easy to disturb, hard to restore. Easy to simplify, hard to understand. Easy to map broadly, hard to know intimately. Easy to call empty, hard to prove fullness quickly. Easy to forget, hard to forgive once damaged. This is why restraint must be active, not passive. The default direction of industrial civilization is toward use. To leave something alone often requires as much decision as to exploit it. Protected areas must be designed. Regulations written. Monitoring funded. Public attention maintained. Scientific uncertainty honestly communicated. Alternatives considered. Benefits questioned. Costs expanded beyond the visible. Leaving the abyssal plain unmined in certain regions would not be inaction. It would be an action of humility. Of course, humility can become rhetoric too. A company can speak of responsible mining. A government can speak of balance. A campaign can speak of protection. A scientist can speak of uncertainty. Words alone do not settle the matter. The abyssal plain requires evidence, transparency, long-term commitment, enforceable rules, and the willingness to say no when knowledge is insufficient. It also requires acknowledging trade-offs honestly. Surface technologies that need metals do not become pure by sourcing those metals from darkness. Land mining harms are real. Deep sea mining harms may be different, less visible, and potentially long-lasting. The question is not which world is convenient to sacrifice, but how to reduce harm without exporting it to the least witnessed place. The abyss should not become the shadow of the energy transition. A transition meant to heal the climate cannot build its conscience on unseen damage. The plane has no lobby, only evidence, only advocates, only the slow testimony of sediment, animals, models, and images. It is a quiet witness in a loud century. And perhaps that is why it matters so much now, because caring for the abyssal plane would prove that humanity can protect something before it becomes a ruin, before the iconic photograph of devastation, before the last individual of a named species, before the public learns too late to mourn properly. It would show that mystery can generate caution, not merely curiosity. That would be a different kind of progress. Not upward, downward, inward, restrained. The vehicle's lights dim for a test, and the plane disappears. Not gradually. It is simply gone from human sight. The animals remain. The sediment remains. The nodules remain. The pressure remains. The dark does not erase the world. It erases our access. When the lights return, the field appears again as if created by the beam. But now, the illusion is easier to resist. The light is temporary. The world is not. The beam moves on, and behind it the nodule field returns to a darkness in which its own processes continue. This is a useful image for knowledge itself. Human attention is a moving beam. The world is wider than the beam. A mature species would remember the dark around what it knows. The abyssal plane is that dark around our certainty. Not because it is unknowable forever, because it is not yet known enough for arrogance. And perhaps no place is ever known enough for arrogance. The plane will continue teaching this if we let it. The abyssal plane is often described as silent. This is true only from the wrong body. A human standing on land hears through air, wind, birds, engines, voices, rain, leaves, insects, traffic, footsteps, distant thunder. Sound is a social and weathered thing. It moves quickly enough to warn and slowly enough to locate. It gives rooms their size and forests their depth. Silence, for us, is the absence of familiar vibrations. Underwater, the meaning changes. The deep ocean is dark, but it is not without sound. Water carries sound efficiently. Low-frequency calls can travel great distances. Earthquakes, storms, ice, currents, animals, ships, sonar, and distant machinery contribute to underwater soundscapes. The abyssal plane, far from the surface noise of waves, still receives acoustic messages from the world above and around it. A whale may call in the deep water. A ship's propeller may pulse through the basin. A submarine landslide may rumble. A storm may write itself downward in pressure and sound. The plane does not hear as we do. But vibration is part of its world. This matters because our impact is not only physical. We think of damage as what breaks, crushes, cuts, or removes. But sound can enter before the machine arrives. Light can enter before the sampler touches. Chemical change can enter before a visible scar forms. The abyssal plane is vulnerable not only to the objects we drop or collect, but to the conditions we alter around it. Noise from shipping and industrial activity can change underwater environments. Light from exploration vehicles can startle animals in places where broad beams are unnatural. Sediment plumes can spread beyond the track that made them. Contaminants can accumulate in organisms that never see the source. The unseen place can be affected by unseen forms of disturbance. This is why the abyssal plane asks for more than a simple footprint calculation. A footprint suggests contact with ground. But the deep has volume. A machine on the bottom disturbs sediment, sound, water, animals, chemistry, and perception. A plume can rise and travel. Noise can move horizontally. Suspended particles can settle in patches far from the initial track. The seafloor is not an isolated surface beneath empty water. It is connected to the water column above, and that water column is itself alive. Above the plain, animals migrate, not the great migrations of hoof and wing that cross land and sky, but vertical migrations through water. Each night, countless organisms rise from deeper layers toward the surface to feed under cover of darkness. Before dawn, many descend again. This daily movement, one of the largest animal migrations on Earth, links surface production and deep waters. Some of what they eat becomes waste that sinks. Some bodies become food. Some carbon is carried downward by their movement. The plain, far below, is not directly part of every migrant's route, but it receives consequences from the water above. The ocean is not just a surface over a floor, it is a living column. The abyssal plain is the lower boundary of that column, the place where falling, swimming, sinking, breathing, decomposing, and settling all meet ground. To understand the plain without the water above would be like trying to understand a forest floor without trees, rain, leaf fall, birds, fungi, and seasons. The floor is not separate from the column. It is fed by it, shaped by it, and sometimes disturbed by it. The abyssal plain is the ocean's memory, but memory is still connected to the living mind above. The water column changes what the plain receives. The plain changes what is buried, recycled, or returned. Together they form an exchange that can be slow, irregular, and difficult to measure, but real. A climate-driven shift in surface plankton communities may change the kind of particles sinking. A change in oxygen minimum zones may affect deep habitats. A warming deep ocean may alter metabolism, circulation, and species ranges. The abyssal plain is not frozen outside the present. It is part of the present, moving slowly. This slow present is hard to narrate because it lacks the clean shape of crisis. A fire burns, a flood rises, a coral bleaches, a glacier calves. The abyssal plain changes more subtly. Food flux alters. Oxygen declines. Sediment chemistry shifts. Species composition changes. A trawl scar persists. A test mining disturbance remains detectable decades later. A nodule field loses structure. These events may not produce immediate images of disaster, but their quietness should not be confused with safety. The abyss teaches that catastrophe can be low contrast. Not every wound is red. Some wounds are gray. A line in mud. A missing sponge. A buried community. A sediment layer mixed out of order. A plume settling where no storm would have placed it. A species absent from a survey that once found it. Damage can be a subtraction so subtle that only long attention can see it. This is another reason baseline knowledge is essential. Without knowing what was there, what changed cannot be understood. Without long-term observation, recovery cannot be distinguished from wishful thinking. Without ecological context, a disturbed plain may look simply like a plain. The abyss's visual restraint can hide harm from the untrained eye. A damaged silence may sound the same to those who never learned its original music. Yet the soundscape itself has changed in parts of the ocean. Human noise travels through water, engines, propellers, seismic surveys, sonar, construction, extraction. The abyssal plain may seem too remote for noise to matter, but the ocean does not respect our sense of remoteness. Sound can cross large distances depending on frequency, depth, temperature, and ocean structure. Animals that use sound or vibration may experience human activity as part of their environment even without direct contact. The deep's darkness may make light rare, but it does not make disturbance rare if sound travels. This introduces a strange inversion. We may be invisible to deep animals, but not inaudible. Our civilization has become a presence in waters we cannot enter with our bodies. The ship above the plain may feel small against the sea. Its acoustic signature may not feel small below. A cable also crosses the plain. Undersea fiber optic cables are among the quiet miracles of modern life. They carry messages, markets, voices, images, arguments, love, panic, entertainment, and work across ocean basins. Much of the internet, that apparently weightless space of human communication, depends on physical lines laid on or buried under the seafloor. Some cross abyssal planes, resting in darkness while human attention races through glass fibers at near-light speeds. This is one of the strangest juxtapositions on Earth. A text message crosses an abyssal plane where a sea cucumber may take an hour to move a body length. Human speed rides over abyssal slowness. The cable is not necessarily a major ecological threat compared with other activities, and cables can be managed carefully. But its presence is symbolic. The abyss is not outside modernity. Modernity lies across it, uses it, depends on it, often without remembering the ground beneath the signal. The cloud is underwater, at least partly. The phrase cloud computing makes data feel weightless, atmospheric, clean, but the networks connecting continents are physical, material, routed through seabed landscapes, maintained by ships, subject to earthquakes, fishing gear, anchors near coasts, and the deep geography of ocean basins. Abyssal plains become corridors for human connection, even as they remain largely unknown as ecosystems. The same place can be infrastructure and habitat. The same floor can carry a cable and host a community. This does not mean all uses are equally harmful. It means use should remember place. The abyssal plain is full of overlapping invisibilities. Invisible to the public as habitat. Invisible within global communications as physical ground. Invisible in climate discussions except as storage and circulation. Invisible in mining debates except as ore province or environmental concern. Invisible in daily life, though it occupies immense area. Each invisibility allows simplification. A cable route can forget the animal. A climate model can forget the individual creature. A mining plan can forget the archive. A conservation slogan can forget the complexity of human material needs. A documentary can forget the science if it loves mystery too much. The challenge is not to replace one simplification with another. The challenge is to hold more of the abyss at once. More, but never all. All is beyond us. This is not failure. It is the condition of living on a planet larger than any mind. No one understands a forest completely either. No one understands a city completely. No one understands even a human body completely. The abyssal plain only makes the incompleteness undeniable. It refuses the illusion that enough confidence can become total knowledge. Incompleteness should not paralyze action. It should refine it. We can map more, protect more, monitor more, reduce harm, avoid premature extraction, invest in taxonomy and deep sea ecology, share data openly, design less invasive instruments, listen to indigenous and coastal relationships with the ocean where relevant to governance, build international law that treats unknown ecosystems with seriousness. Choose not to do some things. Not knowing everything does not mean doing nothing. It means not acting as if ignorance were permission. There is a peculiar loneliness in images from the abyssal plain. A lamp, a circle of sediment, an animal alone in the frame. But loneliness may be the wrong reading. The animal is not lonely in the human emotional sense. It is in its habitat. It belongs. The loneliness belongs to us, looking at a world without our social cues. We project absence because we do not see crowds, shelters, faces, gestures we understand. We see a single creature and feel isolation. But the plane's relationships are not arranged for our comfort. Some are microbial, some chemical, some spatial, some episodic. Some occur over distances we do not perceive. The animal may not be alone. It may be surrounded by signals. The sediment may be alive beneath it. The water may be carrying scents. The darkness may be full of information. Human loneliness is not a reliable instrument for measuring the abyss. Neither is human boredom. Neither is human fear. These feelings matter because they shape decisions, but they must be examined. Fear may make the deep seem monstrous. Boredom may make it seem empty. Loneliness may make it seem abandoned. Greed may make it seem available. Wonder may make it seem sacred but untouchable in a way that ignores actual science. Each feeling reveals something about us before it reveals the plane. Good attention notices the feeling and then looks again. The abyss rewards looking again. A faint track becomes evidence. A blank surface becomes habitat. A stone becomes a nodule. A nodule becomes a settlement surface. A patch becomes part of a global landscape. The plane becomes less lonely when the eye learns company. Company does not always mean abundance. It can mean relationship across scarcity. A single carcass drawing scavengers from wide distances. A sponge filtering particles from a thin current. A microbe breaking down organic matter in sediment pore spaces. A fish following chemical cues. A worm disturbing layers. A brittle star holding arms into the flow. The company of the abyss is often distributed. It is not a crowd in the frame, but a network through processes. On the plane, the dead feed the living alter the mud records the living, currents connect patches, nodules provide structure, and time makes small acts cumulative. This is enough. It may not be enough for entertainment. It is enough for Earth. The abyssal plane does not need to be busy to be alive. This is worth repeating in a culture that often mistakes activity for value. We ask places to perform productivity. Forests become timber. Rivers become water supply or hydropower. Land becomes real estate. Oceans become fisheries, routes, mineral reserves. Carbon sinks. The abyssal plane, with its low visible productivity, struggles to justify itself in such language. But productivity is not the only measure of life. Slow systems can be valuable because they store, stabilize, remember, and sustain specialized forms. They may be low energy, but they are not low meaning. The abyss expands the moral vocabulary beyond productivity. It asks for patience, continuity, rarity, endurance, and hidden function to count. A deep sea mining impact assessment may include species counts, sediment plume models, noise estimates, nodule density, recovery projections, and mitigation plans. These are necessary. But beneath the technical language lies a simpler question that is not simple at all. What kind of world are we willing to damage for the materials of another kind of world? The question cannot be answered by emotion alone, nor by profit alone, nor by science alone, because science can inform values, but not replace them. The abyssal plane sits at the intersection of need and restraint. It asks whether a civilization can recognize that some available things should remain unavailable until understanding, governance, and necessity are much clearer. The fact that something can be reached does not mean it has been earned. Reaching is not the same as deserving. This applies to knowledge too. The abyss is not morally opposed to being known. It is not a forbidden place in any mystical sense, but knowing it responsibly requires methods suited to vulnerability. Cameras that use lower light when possible. Sampling that is justified and minimized. Data sharing that prevents repeated unnecessary disturbance. Protected reference zones. Long-term monitoring before and after any permitted activity. Strong enforcement. Science independent enough to challenge economic momentum. Public narratives that do not reduce the plane to treasure or terror. In other words, curiosity with manners. A phrase that sounds almost too small for half a planet. But perhaps manners are what power forgets first. The abyssal plane is teaching manners at the scale of geology. Enter slowly. Look carefully. Do not assume. Do not take, because taking is easy. Do not confuse silence with consent. Do not confuse darkness with absence. Do not confuse a map with a relationship. Do not confuse need with entitlement. Do not confuse awe with understanding. And when understanding is incomplete, let incompleteness have force. There is a kind of radical modesty in this. Modern culture often celebrates knowing faster, doing more, scaling up, optimizing, extracting, accelerating. The abyssal plane suggests another path. Deliberate limits. Not ignorance. Not anti-science. Not fear of technology. Limits chosen because a place's timescale, complexity, and hiddenness demand them. Limits as intelligence. Limits as a form of care. A deep-sea robot can be a tool of conquest or humility depending on what it is sent to do. A map can open a region to harm or help protect it. A sample can clarify a life or become part of a pattern of careless removal. Technology does not decide the ethics. Purpose does. The plane remains under the ship. The ship moves on. The sound fades. Particles settle. A cable lies in darkness. A nodule holds its small community. A worm continues beneath the surface. A fish crosses where the light had been. For the animals there, the human event has already become something else, a change in sediment, a trace of bait, a brief light, a vibration, perhaps nothing worth responding to. The abyss does not narrate us the way we narrate it. It incorporates or ignores our presence according to its own conditions. That may be a final lesson in humility. We are not always the central event, even when we are the cause of change. The plane is larger than our arrival. It is also not safe from it. Between those truths, responsibility lies. The abyssal planes are not all the same age. This seems obvious, once said, but the mind tends to imagine deep seafloor as one ancient continuous floor, old by default, uniform in darkness. In reality, oceanic crust has a life cycle. New crust is made at ridges, moves outward, ages, cools, deepens, collects sediment, and in many places eventually returns into the mantle at subduction zones. The abyssal plane is therefore not a timeless slab beneath the sea. It is part of a moving planet. Its surface may seem still, but below that stillness, plate tectonics is carrying the floor through geological life. A plane can be on a journey while appearing motionless. This is one of the deep ocean's most disorienting truths. The seafloor moves too slowly for ordinary witness, but it moves. A piece of crust beneath an abyssal plane may have formed at a ridge millions of years ago and traveled outward ever since, accumulating sediments as it went. The animals on the plane live on a moving plate, though movement is too slow to matter in their day-to-day existence. Above them, water circulates. Below them, the planet's rigid skin participates in a cycle of creation and destruction. Stillness at one scale, motion at another. The abyssal plane is where scales disagree. A grain settles in minutes or hours. An animal crosses a camera frame in seconds. A feeding trace may persist for years. A nodule grows through millions. A plate moves through tens or hundreds of millions. A climate signal enters sediment through cycles of ice and warmth. A human expedition lasts weeks. A funding cycle lasts years. A mining permit may last decades. An ecological recovery may require centuries or more. All these times occupy the same place. This is why the abyss feels difficult to think about. It is not only deep in water, it is deep in time. Human attention tends to flatten time into the span of plans, careers, generations, election cycles, market returns, and personal memory. The abyssal plane does not fit. It forces multiple clocks into the room. Some of those clocks are almost silent. The loudest clock, right now, is human demand. Demand for minerals. Demand for communication. Demand for energy. Demand for scientific knowledge. Demand for carbon solutions. Demand for maps. Demand for stories. Demand for access. Demand has a way of making itself sound urgent, and often it is attached to real human needs. But the abyssal plain asks whether urgency alone should govern the slowest places on Earth. Urgency can be honest. It can also be manipulative. A problem at the surface can be used to justify haste in the deep. But the deep has its own conditions, and harm there may not be reversible on the timescale of the urgent problem. A mature response would not deny urgency. It would prevent urgency from becoming blindness. The abyssal plain is not a delay tactic. It is a reality check. Reality checks are rarely convenient. The plain says, the metals are here, but so is life. It says, the area is vast, but exact places matter. It says, the sediment looks soft, but its records are long. It says, the darkness hides, but hiding is not permission. It says, the world needs change, but not every change is healing. It says, you can reach me now, but reaching is not understanding. These are not arguments spoken aloud. They are facts arranged by a place. We must make the ethics from them. There is also beauty in the geology itself. Abyssal plains often form where sediment fills low relief, especially along passive continental margins and in deep basins. They can be among the flattest regions on the planet. That flatness is not bland when understood geologically. It means that rough volcanic crust, faults, and original irregularities have been buried beneath fine deposits. It means that the ocean has been laying a sheet over a broken floor. It means that from chaos of crustal formation and the restless movement of plates, a smooth surface can emerge through deposition. The plain is not the absence of terrain. It is terrain under a blanket of time. A blanket is not always comfort. Here it is weight, record, habitat, and concealment. Beneath the sediment, basalt remembers fire. Above it, water remembers sky. Between them, the plain holds the remains of lives that once floated in sunlight. Fire below, darkness above, and between them mud. This is Earth reduced to elements that sound simple and become immense. Rock made from molten interior. Water-filling basins. Particles descending. Life adapting. Time smoothing. Pressure keeping everything in place. No mythology is needed, yet mythology feels near because the proportions exceed ordinary thought. The abyssal plain lies on a planet that is simultaneously violent and patient. It is made possible by tectonic motion, sediment supply, ocean chemistry, biological production, gravity, and long duration. It is a landscape assembled by many systems that do not know they are collaborating. Collaboration without intention is one of the planet's quiet miracles. The abyssal plain is full of it. Surface organisms make shells, die, and sink. Continents weather and send minerals to the sea. Winds lift dust from deserts. Rivers carry sediment to margins. Turbidity currents rush downward in rare, powerful flows. Volcanoes release ash. Microbes transform matter. Animals stir mud. Chemical conditions dissolve some particles and preserve others. Currents distribute oxygen and food. No single process says, I am building a plane. Yet, the plane is built. This is a different model of creation than the human one. We build with plans, materials, deadlines, purposes. Earth builds through interactions, feedbacks, accidents, persistence. The abyssal plain is not an object made once. It is an ongoing result. It is still being made while it is being lived on. A particle is falling there now. Somewhere, as these words exist, a fragment is descending through the dark. It may never reach the bottom. It may be eaten. It may dissolve. It may be altered beyond recognition. Or it may settle on sediment and join the upper layer of the plain. A tiny event, an event multiplied beyond counting. This is how half a planet is maintained. Not with drama, with fall. The fall of matter is also the fall of sunlight by another route. Sunlight grows plankton, directly or indirectly supports surface food webs, and some of that production sinks. By the time it reaches the abyss, the light itself is gone, but its consequences remain. The plane is not sunlit, yet it is partly sun-fed. This gives the abyssal plane a relationship with the sun that is indirect, delayed, and filtered through death. It is a dark dependency. Life at the plane often depends on what the bright world discards after using. But the relationship is not humiliating. It is ecological. Surface and depth form a cycle. The surface produces. The midwater intercepts. The deep receives. The sediment transforms. The buried record stores. The ocean circulates. Nutrients may eventually return in other places and times. No layer is independent. No layer is complete alone. The abyssal plane is not beneath the living ocean. It is part of how the living ocean continues after light. This changes the idea of darkness. Darkness is not the end of life's story. It is where the story changes grammar. At the surface, life speaks in bloom, chase, color, photosynthesis, wave, reef, flock, migration visible from above. In the abyss, it speaks in particle, scent, weighting, pressure, soft body, burrow, nodule, microbe, track, carcass, slow current. The sentences are longer. The verbs are quieter. The meaning is still there. We are not fluent. But fluency can grow. A future culture might teach the abyssal plane differently. Not as a diagram at the bottom of a page, after continental shelf and slope, but as one of the central landscapes of Earth. Children might learn that much of the planet is covered by deep plains under the ocean, that these plains are made from sediments and support life, that they store records of climate and are affected by human actions. They might learn that the blue on a map is not empty space. They might grow up understanding that home extends downward. What would that change? Perhaps not everything, but imagination learned early becomes ethics later. A child who knows the abyssal plane exists may become an adult less willing to call it empty. A citizen who has seen deep sea footage may ask better questions about mining. A policymaker who understands slow recovery may hesitate before accepting optimistic claims. An engineer who thinks of animals in the sediment may design differently. A storyteller who knows the plane's scale may help others feel it. Culture is also a current. It carries ideas downward into decisions. For now, many people still think of the ocean floor as either reef, shipwreck, trench, or blank. The abyssal plane occupies the blank. It is the unglamorous majority. But majorities shape planets. The plane does not need glamour. It needs accurate attention. It needs to be described not as a void, but as a subdued, living, immense, slow, vulnerable, and essential landscape. Those adjectives are not decoration. They are corrections. Subdued, because the plane does not perform drama. Living, because organisms and microbes inhabit it. Immense, because it spans basins. Slow, because its processes exceed human tempo. Vulnerable, because slow systems can be harmed by fast disturbance. Essential, because it participates in planetary cycles. Each word pushes back against emptiness. The camera rises over a slight change in the bottom. A barely perceptible mound appears, then a shallow depression. In the lights, the features are small, but they break the idea of pure flatness. Perhaps an animal made the mound. Perhaps sediment settled differently. Perhaps a rock lies buried below. The vehicle glides on. Another track crosses the path, then fades. The plane becomes a manuscript written in faint relief. Reading it requires not just sight, but memory. You must remember what uninterrupted sediment looks like to notice disturbance. Remember where nodules were dense to notice their absence. Remember baseline communities to notice change. Remember that a plane can be dynamic without obvious motion. Memory becomes a scientific instrument. The abyss keeps memory in mud. We keep memory in data. The relationship between those memories may decide what happens next. Data can be a form of care when gathered well. A baseline survey says, "This place existed in this condition at this time." A species description says, "This life will not disappear without ever entering language." A long-term monitoring station says, "Change matters enough to watch." An open database says, "Knowledge should not be hoarded." A protected area says, "Not every discovery should become extraction." A careful map says, "The hidden world deserves detail." But data can also be used without care. It can be cherry-picked, minimized, framed toward predetermined outcomes, hidden in proprietary systems, or gathered too narrowly to reveal inconvenient complexity. The moral value of data depends on the ethics around it. The abyssal plane does not simply need more data, it needs more truthful relationships to data. Truthfulness includes uncertainty, especially uncertainty. In the abyss, pretending certainty can be a form of violence. It smooths away the unknowns that should slow decision. It makes risk look managed before the system is understood. It turns sparse samples into confident projections. It reassures people who will never see the place affected. Honest uncertainty is not weakness. It is one of the most important protections the abyss has. To say we do not know enough can be scientifically rigorous. To act anyway as if not knowing enough does not matter is political choice. The abyssal plane makes that distinction visible, at least to those willing to look. The plane waits under layers of argument. Above it, meetings happen. Reports are written. Maps are colored. Statements are issued. Opposition forms. Contracts are negotiated. Technologies are tested. Headlines appear and vanish. Below, the sediment is not waiting in a human sense. It is continuing. That continuation can make surface politics seem small, but it also makes them consequential. The plane does not care about our procedure, yet procedure can decide its future. There is a strange asymmetry here. A world indifferent to politics can be altered by politics. A vote, a permit, a failure of regulation, a moratorium, a protected zone, an enforcement mechanism, these human abstractions can become physical outcomes in mud and water. The invisible world depends on visible institutions. That should make institutions more humble. There are people working now to map, study, and protect the deep. Researchers spending months at sea. Taxonomists naming species. Oceanographers modeling currents. Engineers designing vehicles. Advocates arguing for moratoria or stronger rules. International bodies negotiating mining codes. Artists and filmmakers trying to make darkness felt. None of this is simple or pure. Human motives are mixed. Institutions are slow. Funding is uneven. Science is incomplete. But attention is growing. The abyssal plane is entering the surface imagination. Slowly, in fragments. A field of nodules. A ghostly animal. A map showing unmapped seafloor. A debate over minerals. A photograph of a sea cucumber on a plane that seems to go on forever. These fragments can become a larger awareness if connected carefully. Awareness is not the end. It is the beginning of behavior. The abyss has had enough beginnings. It needs follow-through. A culture that knows the abyss exists and still treats it as empty has not learned. A policy that mentions biodiversity but permits damage without sufficient knowledge has not learned. A market that prices metals but not habitat formation time has not learned. A public that marvels at deep-sea animals but ignores the plane they live on has not learned. Learning, in the abyssal sense, must become slower action, not merely better wonder. And yet wonder remains necessary. Without wonder, responsibility becomes dry and brittle. Without responsibility, wonder becomes escape. The abyssal plane requires both held together. We must be able to say, this place is beautiful in a difficult way, and therefore we should study it. This place is vulnerable in a slow way, and therefore we should be careful. This place is valuable beyond use, and therefore not every value must be converted into extraction. This place is unknown, and therefore ignorance should increase caution, not decrease it. The plane is dark. Let that darkness deepen the care, not weaken it. In the beam, the sediment brightens one last time. A small animal pauses beside a nodule. Its body casts a faint shadow. The shadow lasts only because the human light is there. Then the vehicle turns, and the shadow disappears. The animal remains. The nodule remains. The plane remains. For a moment, the camera has made a small theater of a world that does not need theater. Then, the theater moves away, and the abyss returns to its own form of being. Dark, pressurized, slow, alive, the world above will continue its arguments. The world below will continue receiving their consequences. Near the end of a long dive, fatigue changes the way people watch. In the control room, the first excitement has passed. The vehicle has been on bottom for hours. Screens glow in the dimness. Someone notes depth, heading, altitude. Someone tracks samples. Someone watches for animals. Coffee cools in cups. The ship moves gently above, held in place by engines and skill against wind and current. The people are tired enough to stop demanding that the abyss impress them. That is often when the abyss becomes most present. Not in a sudden revelation, in acceptance. The plane on the screen is no longer a disappointing emptiness or a strange spectacle. It is simply where they are. A real place with its own textures and rhythms. The slow animal crossing the frame is not a novelty now. It is a resident. The sediment is not background. It is context. The nodules are not stones. They are structures and histories. The darkness beyond the lights is not a void. It is more plain. More water. More lives. More unknown. The mind finally stops trying to turn the abyss into something else. It lets the plain be plain. This may be the most difficult form of respect. To not decorate a place with fantasies it did not ask for. To not dismiss it because it refuses spectacle. To not reduce it to resource because it contains useful materials. To not turn it into a symbol so completely that the actual mud disappears. To not demand that it become familiar before it becomes worthy. The abyssal plane remains a plain, wide, dark, sedimented, inhabited, pressured, slow. Its meaning does not come from resemblance to land. It does not need to be an underwater desert, an underwater prairie, an underworld, a moonscape, a wasteland, a treasure field, a frontier, or a cathedral. Comparisons can help the mind begin, but eventually they must loosen. The plane is itself. That is enough. Above the plane, the ocean column continues for kilometers. Somewhere in that black height, a particle is falling. Somewhere above that, a fish is rising toward dusk. Somewhere higher, plankton are drifting in the last usable light. Somewhere at the surface, waves are breaking under wind. Somewhere above the waves, clouds are forming from water that may one day fall as rain on land, enter a river, carry minerals to the sea, feed organisms, sink in altered form, and join the slow rain that reaches the bottom. The cycle does not form a perfect circle. It is messier, more branching, more interrupted, more full of losses and transformations. But the connections are real. The abyssal plane lies at the receiving end of many of them. It is not separate from the cloud, not separate from the river, not separate from the plankton, not separate from the whale, not separate from the storm, not separate from the cable, not separate from the factory smoke, not separate from the choices made under fluorescent lights far from any coast. Half the planet, hidden, receiving. Perhaps this is why the abyssal plane should change the way we think about the word world. A world is not just the part with sunlight, not just the part with weather we can feel, not just the places named on political maps. not just coastlines and forests and fields and cities. A world includes the places where pressure would crush us, where darkness is normal, where animals move through mud under a ceiling of water, where the remains of the surface fall and are changed into something else. A world includes the parts that do not love us, do not need us, do not explain themselves, and yet are connected to us beyond denial. The abyssal plane is the world refusing to fit inside the human day. The day is bright, busy, shallow in the literal sense. It fills with tasks, voices, movement, screens, meals, weather, errands, fear, ambition, affection, all of it matters. But below the day, the plane continues. It does not cancel the day. It deepens it. It reminds the surface that every hour is suspended over more earth than it can see. A person can stand by the sea at noon and not know this. The water can look harmless. A gull can turn in the wind. A child can dig a trench in wet sand. A boat can move across the horizon. The sun can scatter on the surface in such brightness that the eye narrows. And below that brightness, descending through layer after layer, the light fails, the water cools, particles fall, animals wait, currents move, and eventually the abyssal plane begins. Not as a metaphor, as a floor, as a landscape, as a hidden majority. The sand under the child's hand and the mud 4 kilometers below are not the same, but they belong to the same planet, the same long material conversation. One is warmed by sun, the other is fed by what sunlit life leaves behind. One is reshaped each day by waves and feet, the other may hold a mark for decades. One is familiar enough to be overlooked, the other is unfamiliar enough to be overlooked in a different way. Both forms of overlooking are dangerous. The abyssal plane asks for a steadier kind of attention, not constant obsession. No one can live always with half the planet in mind. But a steadier background awareness, a correction built into the way we speak and decide. When we say ocean, we might remember depth. When we say seafloor, we might remember habitat. When we say mineral, we might remember nodule time. When we say mapping, we might remember that shape is not life. When we say unexplored, we might remember that unexplored is not empty. When we say development, we might ask what is being diminished. When we say conservation, we might include the places without sunlight. Language can become a kind of sonar. It can return a truer shape of the world if we send the right questions into the dark. What is there? Who lives there? How long has it taken to form? What happens if we remove it? What do we not know? Who benefits? Who bears the cost when the cost has no human face? What should remain untouched? These questions do not solve the abyss. They slow the hand. Sometimes, slowing the hand is the beginning of care. There is an old human desire to end a story with arrival. The ship reaches the destination. The explorer reaches the pole. The climber reaches the summit. The spacecraft reaches the moon. The submersible reaches the bottom. Arrival gives narrative a clean shape. But the abyssal plane does not end with arrival. Arrival is only a brief disturbance in an older continuity. The vehicle lands, the lights turn on. The samples are taken. The footage is watched. The papers are written. The public sees a fragment. The debate moves on. The plane remains. Any honest story about the abyss must therefore end not with conquest, but with continuation. The continuation is the point. A sea cucumber continues across sediment after the camera leaves. Microbes continue in poor waters. Particles continue falling. Nodules continue being old. Currents continue their slow passage. Unknown animals continue without names. Sediment continues gathering the surface's remains. A world continues beneath a world. Continuation can be more moving than climax. A climax belongs to a moment. Continuation belongs to time. The abyssal plane belongs to time. It has endured in darkness while the surface invented agriculture, cities, ships, empires, telescopes, engines, radio, satellites, deep-sea vehicles, and the digital networks that now cross its floor. It has held its slow work under everything. It has received the ordinary endings of life and the extraordinary residues of civilization. It has been ignored, studied, targeted, protected in places, misunderstood in others, and still it remains larger than any single human intention. The plane is not untouched, but it is not yet fully surrendered to us either. That matters. There is still room for restraint, still room for better science, still room for laws strong enough to respect uncertainty, still room for technologies designed with humility, still room for stories that teach people to feel the deep without falsifying it. Still room for leaving much of the darkness as darkness, not because knowledge is unwelcome, but because exposure and extraction are not the same as knowledge. Darkness can be protected, not by never looking, by not assuming that every place looked at must become a place used. This may be one of the most important distinctions of the century. Humanity is learning to see more of the planet than ever before. Satellites, sensors, drones, autonomous vehicles, genetic tools, data platforms, models, the hidden world becomes measurable. But measurement must not automatically become possession. The ability to see is not a license to take. The ability to reach is not a command to harvest. The ability to disturb is not proof that disturbance is acceptable. The abyssal plane holds this lesson in its silence. The dive is ending now. The vehicle lifts from the seafloor, leaving the bottom slowly. The camera tilts downward one last time. The plane recedes into the lights, a pale surface fading at the edges. The shadows of nodules lengthen and distort, then merge. A small animal moves through the frame, unaware of finality. The sediment cloud stirred by the thrusters drifts, opens, thins. The beam catches falling particles, each one briefly bright, each one continuing its descent after the machine begins to rise. The altimeter increases. 1 meter. 5, 10. The bottom becomes less detailed, then more abstract. Then it is only a muted plane below. Then it is gone. The vehicle rises into black water, carrying images, samples, and the odorless evidence of a world. The plane below returns to darkness. Not empty darkness. Not abandoned darkness. The darkness of a place whose own life does not require witness. Above, the ship will recover the machine. Water will pour off metal. Hands will guide lines. A deck will shine with salt. Someone will remove a drive filled with footage from a landscape larger than all human territories and smaller, in the file, than the memory of a phone. Inside the data will be hours of mud, hours of life, hours of almost nothing happening. If almost nothing means that the human appetite for event has not yet learned the abyssal tempo. Later, the footage will be reviewed. Frames will be marked. Species noted. Sediment types described. Tracks counted. Nodules measured. Questions added to questions. The plane will become reports, maps, papers, presentations, arguments, protections perhaps, or proposals, or warnings. It will enter language again. But language will never be the plane. The plane is still below. This gap between language and place is where respect must remain awake. No script, no map, no paper, no law, no image can replace the abyssal plane itself. All of them are approaches. Some are careful, some are careless, some are beautiful, some are useful, some are dangerous. The place continues beyond them. It exceeds description the way it exceeds light. A responsible culture would let that excess matter. It would understand that the unknown is not merely unfinished knowledge, but part of the reality of a complex world. It would resist the urge to make every mystery profitable. It would allow some questions to slow decisions rather than decorate them. It would recognize that half the planet hidden in darkness is not a blank inheritance, but a living trust. A trust. That word is heavier than treasure. Treasure invites taking. Trust invites care. The abyssal plain is not a vault waiting to be opened. It is a trust held by the present for the future, by the visible world for the unseen, by a species with power for worlds without speech in our councils. We did not create it. We do not fully understand it. We cannot replace it. These three facts should shape every decision. The camera is far above the seafloor now. Below, the plain has disappeared from view, but not from reality. This is how the abyss will always be for us, present beyond sight, a pressure beneath the surface of thought, a dark width under the blue. The vehicle climbs through the midnight water. No horizon appears, only particles, occasional life, the soft glow of instruments. Hours pass. The water changes slowly. Somewhere above, daylight waits, not as a promise to the abyss, but as a condition of the surface. The plane does not rise with the machine. It remains below, taking back its darkness completely. At last, far overhead, the sea begins to lighten. The first blue is faint, then stronger. The surface trembles above like a moving ceiling. The vehicle breaks through. Air surrounds it. Voices return. The sun is bright enough to make people squint. Everything seems normal. That may be the strangest moment of all. The normal surface, after the dark majority. The blue water, after the gray plain. The warm light, after the cold floor. The easy breath, after the pressure. The world of air reasserts itself so quickly that the abyss might feel like a dream, if not for the data in the machine and the mud in the sample tubes and the quiet change in those who watched. The sea closes behind the vehicle. A few circles spread outward, then flatten into the ordinary movement of waves. Nothing on the surface shows the plain below. No sign rises, no message, only water, reflecting sky. And under it, layer after layer, the ocean descends again into darkness. The particles fall, the currents move. The sediment recedes. The animals continue their slow work across a floor wider than memory. Half the planet lies there, unseen in the day, not asking to be believed. Just present. Just deep. Just alive. Far below the last blue, where the weight of the ocean is no longer a number, but a world, the abyssal plain stretches beyond the reach of light. A pale track crosses the mud. A nodule rests beside it. A small body pauses, then moves on. Above it, the water is black. Above that, black again. Above that, eventually, waves. The plain does not end. It only disappears from sight. And still, even after the surface has gone quiet, the plain is not motionless. A worm turns unseen beneath a film of sediment. A current touches the edge of a small mound and leaves behind a different arrangement of grains. A flake of organic matter, softened by its long fall, settles into the mud and becomes available to mouths too small for the camera to admire. In the dark, nothing announces these events. No color changes across a horizon, no storm cloud gathers, no bird lifts from a tree. There is only the work itself, modest and continuous, happening without witness, in a place too large for witness to matter. This is the dignity of the abyssal plain. It does not become less because it is unseen. It does not become simple because it is quiet. It does not become empty because we are late. Somewhere above, the ocean surface will keep changing its expressions. It will shine, darken, wrinkle, break, roar, flatten, and mirror the moon. Ships will cross. Rain will fall. Satellites will pass overhead. Maps will improve. People will argue about what should be touched, what should be measured, what should be left alone. Below all of it, the plane will keep receiving the world in particles. A little more sediment, a little more time, a little more evidence that Earth is not finished with its own darkness. The abyssal plane is not a secret in the dramatic sense. It is not hiding behind a door. It is hidden by scale, water, depth, and the habits of human attention. It lies open beneath the ocean and remains inaccessible at the same time, a vast exposed surface under a roof no eye can cross without help. That contradiction will remain. Maybe it should. A world that can still exceed us may be one of the things that keeps us honest. Down there, the floor goes on. Past the last lamp. Past the last mapped swath. Past the last confident sentence. Soft sediment. Dark stones. Faint tracks. Old layers. Small lives. Slow chemistry. Cold water. And the weight of everything above. No sunrise touches it. No wind crosses it. No footstep belongs there. And yet, it is part of home. The ocean holds it in darkness, not as absence, but as depth. The surface brightens. The waves move. The hidden plane remains. Wide, quiet, unfinished, alive.